Sort of like taxes, huh? Miles, say an hour or an hour and a half, because that's the relevant statistic.
Tasks. For the last 12 months. For tonight's meeting, I want to do a real quick, not so much a review, but present and answer any questions that the board might have regarding what I thought was pretty extraordinary accomplishment over the course of the last 12 months in accomplishing those 5 very large goals and all the subset activities that were beneath it. And that was despite the contingency budget and some fairly tough economic times that we've experienced within the last 12 months. So no reason to read it, but I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have about it or concerns about those few items at which we did not make any progress.
Anybody? Well, I'll start with the capital improvement one, and that seems one that we missed on. We did streets, but what's the action for that?
The streets, which were an outgrowth of having the prioritized street improvement plan. But you're right. Since the day I walked in the door, one of the things I've wanted to accomplish was the 20-year universal capital improvement and maintenance plan. And while Director Hawkes did an excellent job on getting us the street component, we have not made nearly the progress that we wanted to on the rest of water, sewer, storm, sidewalks, tree inventory, facilities, and the like. That's the highest priority that you'll find on Kurt's 2010 PEA. And I think I distributed those this week with the most recent weekly digest. I believe we have a 6-month implementation to get it done. He knows, and even if we need to use some additional third-party help in order to get it done, but it remains the highest priority for us.
Okay. That's all I had. Anybody else? Lisa?
Mine is just about when we're going to initiate the goal setting for this next year.
No. My recommendation is that after the April elections, we probably don't have enough time to do it right now, so we'll have an April election. We might have new board members then. At least in my mind, it would make sense to do that after the election cycle. Unless people feel otherwise. Lisa?
Well, it's a third of the year, and town manager, may direction.
I do get that, but I guess I wouldn't want to have I'm not sure what the elections will look like, but they'd have election. I hate to do a work plan, have an election cycle, and people say no, don't really agree with that. You know what I mean?
Could we initiate something and then sort of finalize it after that? But at least if there's anything that we want to work on between now and April, that's us.
Yeah, that'd be fine with me. People have strong feelings one way.
It would take us that long to figure out when
Yeah, you recall the 2008, we did the first one in May and the second one in September. Yeah, it took us.
maybe we need to start that process.
Start now so we can be done by September. All right, so I will ask Phyllis and to send a round of emails to figure out what nights work for people, and then we probably have some off Monday nights, and I suspect I would start there and see what that looks like. If those don't work.
I think part of it is because we want to make sure that we have a high focus on good education out about what's going to go on the ballot in April. So that's a really thing.
Okay. Sounds fair.
Any other questions over any of the material that was included?
No, like you said, it was a lot of work. So.
Yeah, I think it reflects a heck of a year of accomplishment.
It's surprising, when you do this kind of daily. It's like watching your kids grow, right? You never see them grow, but when Aunt Millie comes over, they're much taller.
Yeah.
When you do this on a daily basis, you really don't see what gets done. Okay. Next. And I'll be right back. Drink real quick.
Kurt's prepared a report regarding direction staff is recommending we take regarding engineering services in the course of the coming fiscal year. You'll recall that in 2009 we entered into a engineering service agreement with RG Engineering. It called for a total expenditure not to exceed. We did have a very aggressive year, probably capped most by the fact that our street program tripled in size from what we'd envisioned. All of it got done. Most of it got done at budget. And we lived within the terms of that agreement. And I believe the cost was not to exceed $205,000 for all the things that we threw onto the table last year. But with a new Director of Public Works and Utilities, we have a new direction, a new focus. And while you have the report, I'd ask Kurt to come up and make a short presentation.
Great. And thanks for thinking outside the box, as they say.
Good evening, Mayor and Board.
Yes.
I've heard a few things since I've been here. In the short time that I've been here, I've heard concerns just about cost estimates and making sure projects come in at the cost that we budget for and plan for when you approve contracts. I think, and I had observed, but just heard that maybe there's an observation that all the projects that we budget for a fiscal year aren't getting done in the fiscal years that we choose to get them done in. And so this strategy that I'm proposing kind of addresses those two things, bringing in different sets of eyes and using multiple firms to get our work done. Anytime we do projects, there's three components, and you can only pick two of those three components. It doesn't work if you try to pick all three. So we want to do things cheap, we want to do them fast, they're not going to get done very good, and vice versa. And I think when I look back at some of the projects in the past, we've experienced some issues where either the projects got out to a late start and they were trying to get done fast on a budget, and that they didn't get done as well. And I've heard things about a roundabout, the recent roundabout, the 88th roundabout. That was part of the problem on the streets with the concrete. And so I think that's something as we move through our projects and as we talk about each project, we need to keep those things in mind. It's a two-part approach. I'm going to talk about consultant procurement and how we're going to go about that, and then talk about our staffing strategy here at the town and how we'll try to deliver more with what we have. The approach I'm about to talk about is for an RFQ, request for qualifications. We're going to do a qualifications-based selection. Colorado has statutes that cover this. CDOT uses this type of approach, so I'm not making up anything new here. It's just kind of a different way of thinking from the traditional bid build. So the process that we're going through right now, and last Monday we released an RFQ out to the general public, and that's a request for qualifications. And what we said is, here's our 5-year capital plan. Here is, we have some day-to-day needs, and here's some other needs as far as studies or whatnot. And if you're interested, we don't care how big you are or how small you are or how expensive or how cheap. Tell us what projects you want to work on. Tell us where you feel you fit us with your expertise. And then from that overall response, we'll kind of see what the best fit is for the town. So when we get that response, what we'll do, and they're going to open on the 22nd, which will be the Friday before the next meeting. So hopefully we'll have a list of how many firms submitted. We're going to rank and we're going to interview those firms, similar to what we went through before last year and ended up with RG and CH kind of negotiating. We're going to have with a short list. Right now we're thinking 3 to 5, and we'll have a better feel for that once we see what the response is and the types of firms and how they all match up. We're going to, instead of picking one, we're going to pick a group of people. And we're going to make sure that that group of people, like I said, matches us the best. And we're going to use that pool of people to do our work moving forward, rather than just rely on one firm. And I say that for many reasons. When we have a project come up, we're going to give them a scope of work, that group of people, and get costs from them. So in a way, we'll have a qualified group of people still giving us a competitive cost. We're not just handing it away. And then, like I said, we'll receive the cost proposals from that shortlist group. I think it's good to have a qualified group of people. It's dangerous right now just to put a bit. I'm going to say a few things about putting out an RFP. Right now, it's a lot of work. There's so many people out there that want to do work that you just get calls every day, and you don't get a lot done dealing with that. And I think that's a good thing and a bad thing. And the other thing that happens is a lot of people are buying jobs. So the bids we're getting, they're cheap. They look good on paper, but when you actually get into the project, maybe they don't have the expertise that they advertise. Maybe the firm bought the project because they're almost going out of business, and now we get to struggle with the going out of business part. So there's a lot of danger to what I call chumming the water right now as far as bidding. It's like a feeding frenzy, and you got to be careful what you get. So what we're going after is trying to find who we think the quality firms are, and then still get competitive results from them moving forward. Questions on this?
So when you send out the RFQ, do you send out kind of the types of things we're anticipating so that they know if they have a fit with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they know what our 5-year CIP is that was just approved looks like,
Okay.
and then some of our day-to-day things.
And you're only talking about this for consulting engineering, not for the construction work.
Right.
Thank you.
right. One of the things that we have a challenge with is when we really get a lot of projects going, we get spread thin, and there's kind of a gap. And I think that's a bottleneck in our strategy now. I don't think it's a bad thing. Contracting everything out is good, but we have to have some flexibility in pulling people in and out to assist us in managing these people. And so we did talk about in that memo having some third-party help at certain points in times. And that'll take care of that gap. And I think the biggest thing that I'm pointing out when I say that we have a gap and a bottleneck is, if you look at our CIP plan right now, number one, projects aren't getting done because of a lot of projects. And then we're spread so thin as we're trying to get all those projects done that we're not looking down the road. There's no long-term planning going on. This really tails off. And I think what's important is to keep a balanced focus moving forward on our program. Make sure we get the projects that we want to get done in 2010 and 2011 done in those years. But at the same time, we have to look at 2015 and 2020.
Just a small question. Do dollars pretty much follow that same pattern?
Not always. You could have a lot of small projects, and that's a challenge because small projects can take up as much time as a big project. But your overall bottom line for the CIP is small. You could have a few big ones. I think in 2012, it doesn't look like a lot. I think Windy Gap's budgeted in that, and it's about a $13 million project. So,
And that's all I'm getting at, is that
Yeah.
in some cases, some of the small projects need a base load amount of attention as well per project.
yeah.
But on the big ones, it may be one project, but it may be so many $1 million that you need, proportionally more staff time to review that. So
Exactly. I
That's
think
all
if
I'm
you were
asking.
to look, it's like 3 million, 3 million, 13, maybe
Toledo.
2, something like that in millions for our program budgets.
Thank
so.
you.
So that's kind of what I've worked with, developing this strategy. And what I wanted to do was just talk to Scott about it, make sure he was comfortable, and then we want to share it with you. Nothing that I do will work unless you're comfortable with it. We're spending a lot of money. These projects take a lot of time and effort for all of us to coordinate on. And I want to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And if you guys understand where we're going and support it, or if you don't support it, we figure out where we should be going.
So I think your plan also calls for a little bit of a bump in internal staff, a part-time staff person. And is that above what we are now, and also above what we were, say, a year or two ago? Or is it sort of bringing in a position we used to have and sort of refilling it?
Actually, it's just a third-party contract. So we'll contract with someone like we would contract with a consultant, and I guess you could call them a consultant. We're going to look at trying to do it more on a personal level. Like one single person, they're reporting to us, and it's not like we're reporting to a company and they go.
Thanks.
So but they won't be a staff. They will not be a town employee.
Thanks.
Yulia?
So,
No, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Just overall, just your presentation, and I'm fully on board, and I appreciate the way you explain things and the way you're going about it. For me personally, you have my full support. I don't think, I've been here for 3 years, this is the first time that I've ever seen anything like this at the beginning of the year. So I want to thank you for your professionalism and just the way you present how you're thinking, too. It's new, but that's because it's new doesn't mean that it's not good.
Joe?
Kurt, I
Yeah.
had a question to go back on the process you're planning to follow, and then I had a couple comments.
Sure.
The question is, you're going to develop your short list of qualified firms, so that's an RFQ where people are going to submit their quals to you,
Yes.
and then you're going to have 3 to 5 firms that you feel are qualified, and then as work arises, you're going to issue scopes of work at that point of time to get cost proposals.
Yes.
And what do you expect the turnaround time for those cost proposals to be?
I think that probably, in my mind, I would think a week to 2 weeks,
Okay.
depending on the size of the project. The idea is that these people will get to know us and we'll get to know them. And so the process, they'll kind of know where we're coming from in advance. And we're going to skip a lot of the marketing fluff that's built into just a general RFP, and it should streamline our process.
So what do you think their cost repercussions are for submitting just cost proposals in this manner without a guarantee, some expectation of getting work.
I think if you talk to some of the big boys that really throw together a nice proposal, they're probably spending $30,000 or $40,000 to sit in front of us and put something before us.
So, and you don't think that'll be a problem to get 3 to 5 interested in playing the game that way?
No.
Okay.
I've gotten a pretty overwhelming response of just last week phone calls. So I imagine beyond the response we had last year.
And I'd remind the board, we had 36 responses last year to our request for proposals.
A couple of the comments I had were, and I think what we tried to do in the past life, and I'm not here at Superior in job, was much larger scope, so we were trying to bring in an A&E
Yeah.
construction and construction management kind of stable. And the
Hey,
problem
I'm
we
sorry.
had was,
Architectural and engineering.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Yeah.
the problem we had without some kind of guarantee of work was the costs associated in playing that game without, and having staff online available to respond to us without some kind of knowledge that they were going to get something to cover their overhead of being ready to support us.
Well, I think in this approach,
So this I'm sensing is not quite of that
No.
magnitude.
no, and I'm trying to get away from having one firm have a complete set of staff. Just
We were looking for a stable,
okay.
and then we were going to compete the individual scopes among the stable. And that compete among the stable part is like, how many times do we have to bid to get some of this money back,
Sure.
kind of thing. This investment back was kind of what they were balking at.
I wanna
But I
make
don't
that
think the
part
magnitude here
slim.
is the same. I guess that was, and I guess, do you agree with that these guys can afford to do your cost proposals?
I think so. I mean, I don't envision soliciting a full proposal with all the pretty pictures and all that. We're looking for a simple list, a task, a simple scope, and a price. And I think those things can get generated pretty efficiently. And I think by eliminating the marketing stuff, we make that process work better.
Could I follow up with one other
Yeah, of course.
question? Since it's in your paper, could you clarify what your vision is of continuing with RG then? Because I think that was part of your vision too, is to have them as part of your satchel of tools or whatever.
Yeah. RG's got a lot of history. They have a lot of files. They've done a lot of studies. They have a lot of knowledge on this town. And while there's some things that went a little rough, I think there's a lot of things that have gone well. And so, I don't think it's justified to let RG go. But I think they definitely deserve to compete with the other firms, and if they appear on paper to be the most experienced and to provide the best value, I think they deserve jobs. But I think by opening the door, we can benchmark that. Right now, we can't, because we've been with RG as one firm for several years.
Yeah, Lisa.
I'd like to compliment the sort of humane process also. I think this is a better way to go about it with the RFQ, and it's not a winner-takes-all sort of thing, and we get the chance to see who can shine on specialty projects, and I think that's great. It gives opportunities for big and small firms, and if something's not working out, we're not stuck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dan?
The only other question I think I would have is, what about response time? Do you perceive that as far as, with the type of relationship that now we have with RG, that it might delay things a little bit doing it this way?
I don't think so. I mean, every firm out there is ebbing and flowing right now.
Okay.
Or I should say, staying stable or losing people. And RG is part of that process. And I don't think RG, there are some things I think RG can respond pretty quickly on. But there's other things, if I hand them the whole program, they would just
It would
stall out.
Okay.
So by having multiple groups, it allows us to speed up, I
Okay.
think.
And about how many, when you say short list, about how many do you expect to be on that short list?
I'm thinking 3 to 5 now.
Okay.
I think we'll know better once we see who's submitted and what they want to do, where they're good at.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's something we should at least try and, open up to to maybe hopefully finding some different type of consultants that we haven't looked at.
Deborah, I think I saw a pencil.
Yep, pencil. So in going in this process with getting the qualifications of the engineering firms, I'm assuming it will cost more upfront, but I'm hoping that on the back end where the actual construction or completion of the project, it is either more cost-effective because of time and effort, or the design process, because it is more honed in, will be easier on the back end. Do you understand where I'm going here?
I do. This process that we're going through now, it costs us internal staff time, but we're not paying for this. So other than that, it's free. It costs my time and the interview committee's time. So that's pretty small in our overall budget. And then on the back end, I think we will, I hope that we'll see some gains in productivity or value. Because I hope that when you put out an RFP for just, we want one firm to do everything. Well, there's not a lot of firms that do everything. So you get a limited pool. By opening it up and saying, hey, if you're just a landscaper, you're really good at that stuff, we want you. If you're just good at survey, we want you. If you're good at water, wastewater, we want you. And so by getting those things, I hope that we'll get some niche players on our team. And then when we go to do some of these, like the water, wastewater projects on the plants, these guys that, our projects to some of these guys are routine, and they don't do it like that. Versus maybe we're trying to get a generalist who's a little bit outside of their boundaries, but they're still getting the project done. Did I answer?
Yeah, and so then I'm going to follow up with, how do you anticipate qualifying this and quantifying it? So how are you going to know that this was a better way to go?
Well, I think we'll have to measure that anyway. It won't be a measurement we'll let make overnight. So we'll have to compare how this year went to last year, 2 years or 3 years ago. So that'd be, I think, the first measurement. Speed and how the program progresses out of the gates here in the first half of the year, I think will tell us how we're going. How we qualify and how we're going to rank, we're going to look at their rate schedules. We're going to look at the expertise of different types of projects, their staff and how long their staff's been with them. Staff size, are they going up, are they going down, if they've been able to say where they're at. And I think those things combined, things will pare down pretty quickly, I believe. And so that's how we'll get to that 3 to 5.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate the visual images.
So I agree. I think this is an interesting approach that we should try. I don't think there is a whole bunch of downside. I mean, we'll learn over the course of a year if it's working or not, and if it is fantastic. If not, then we can go back to Plan A. My only question is there a need to have an engineer on staff, either on a contractual basis or in-house? I mean, I know that you are, but so that things can be referred, overnight to them to have weigh in on? Is that ever needed? I just don't know operationally.
Busy work. I think there's a need for busy work, but I don't have a complete bid for it yet. And I can say that when the roundabout was going, I had my own learning curve going on, but when the roundabout was going on, when that project got into trouble, it took an extreme amount of time. And there's a lot of other things that weren't getting done, or you're just working longer hours to make up for what you lost. So I think it comes and goes. So I think there is some need. There is a lot of projects this year, and to get them out the door and to get them done, it's going to take a lot of hours.
So do you think that you, without having RG on board necessarily, that you could manage? I mean, basically, you're turning into contract management here. Are you able to manage all those contracts and get quick enough feedback to have a flavor about that?
With the pool approach, I think so, because it'll really streamline that process. If we weren't doing this approach and we were just doing a general RFP out to the general public every time, there's no way.
Yeah.
We'd just bog down.
Okay, and will one of these firms, you said looking for niche players, but would one of these firms also be kind of a general
Yeah.
engineering firm? A couple of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Next steps then for this?
Very briefly, one of the things that I found most beneficial here was the last page on Kurt's report, which identified each of the projects over the next 5 years. But I went through and just highlighted those in 2010, and the fact that Kurt's already come up with a game plan on how he wants to approach each of those projects. And that's under the staffing column, which he thinks he can do in-house by himself or with some contractual assistance, which should be assigned to one of the stable here.
I feel like we're in the Kentucky Derby right now.
Yeah, I know. Thanks, Joe, but it is in the vernacular, in the vocabulary. And a couple, and Lisa, this may go back to yours. It's Kurt's suggestion that a couple of our projects, we would be better served by doing a design build, which is we design it up to about 30% and then let the construction community finish the design and build it. And again, we've never done that in Superior. He's identified a couple of projects, including the reconstruction of Indiana between Colton and El Dorado, as one of the 2 or 3 projects he thinks are best suited for design build this year.
I think that helps with that whole risk problem, so,
Yeah.
Transfers it.
yep.
And the fact that it's been done, there's been no permanent solution
They get
so far.
responsibility.
Maybe somebody can take
Yeah.
another look at it and see something else, so, yeah.
And street reconstruction is slightly different, but when you do design build, do you get as-builds then afterwards? I mean, the typical thing is you have all the drawings up front, and then you go implement that.
Yeah.
At the 30% level, you don't have that. Do they come back at the end of the project and give you a
They do.
papers
your
or-
design, your original design team may not stay with you, but there is a construction design team through the project, and so we would get as-builds.
Okay.
I think the design build part, instead of having an engineer take a simple project and spend a lot of money to tell a contractor how to do something that's straightforward, or maybe there's some projects where, I don't think this is us, but I'm just describing the design build. There may be areas where you take it up to 30% and you say, hey, this is our concept, but we're not quite sure how to get to the end, the cheapest route. We could design something, but we're not sure that's the cheapest way. That allows us to bring the contractors in early and develop the final product. And they have a lot of intuition on, well, if you use that method, it's going to be a lot more expensive or take a lot longer than if you go this other route. So you get different types of inputs.
Okay. Lisa?
And I don't think we get the things that the original planners do for the design aren't always what ends up as the as-built anyway, so we have to get the
Yeah.
stuff back anyway, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else about this,
Yes,
Joe?
one last question. The envisioning a project review that we're doing, say, for a final development plan that goes out for engineering review, who would that go to? Somebody, one of these stable, or somebody that you have, your staff, or?
Like a development related?
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
would
for
go-
example, I anticipate we'll get an FDP on the Ashna property
Yeah.
sometime, and we'll need to review that and get engineering comments on their submission. How will that be accomplished? Will that be accomplished differently than in the past? Or how do you envision it?
I've discussed that with Mr. Mangley. Right now, RG is the go-to on reviews. They're really good at reviews. That is one of their fortes. But we've discussed, asking this group of candidates as we interview if they have that expertise, and if they do, possibly using them as well, just to try to mix it up a little bit. Rocky Mountain Fire District, we were getting reimbursed for that plan review, so we did that one here in-house. So it's case by case.
Because those kind of have a built-in turnaround time requirement, don't they, that
Yeah.
will put you a little bit under the gun
Yeah. You get under the gun.
for competing, or, to get proposals and do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So once again, the next steps would be, it sounds like you already sort of had things in the media right now for the RFQs.
The selection, any of the design contracts which would require board approval would come back with an individual board authorization item as an action item for the board to say, we want to hire firm A, B, or C for this particular project. Here's their proposal, here's their cost.
Okay. So it comes back individually then.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll touch base next meeting on just what the responses we
Okay, great. Thanks.
Third agenda item is one that
Let's
we
go
thought
from the ridiculous to the sublime now.
is an agenda item or a discussion item that we thought we'd put to rest back in September. Unfortunately, it's not. You've received my short cover memo with some staff recommendations. You've received a lengthier memo from the town attorney explaining how the universe has changed in the last few weeks. I'll have Kendra start it off, and then I'll go into the staff recommendations.
As I outlined in the memo, and I hope you all got that, the judge in the Centennial case, this is the case where one of the medical marijuana dispensaries sued the city of Centennial because the city of Centennial shut them down. What happened was they had a hearing on a preliminary injunction. This is not a final decision in the case. This is just the first of many decisions in the case. But in that decision, the court said municipalities may not ban medical marijuana dispensaries. It was a kind of confusing ruling because the judge said, despite that, Canamart, that was the name of the dispensary in question, Canamart cannot reopen there because they're not zoned to be there. And when the Centennial attorney tried to argue, but we don't have any zone where they are allowed, the judge said, well, I'm going to consider them to be a pharmacy. So it's a little bit confusing because there's going to be a lot more in this case because Canamart can't open again right now where they were anyway. So it's going to continue to play itself out. The bad part of the ruling is basically that the judge said federal law cannot be enforced by municipalities. The municipalities are stuck with the state constitution. The state constitution says there is a constitutional right to possess and use marijuana for certain debilitating medical conditions. And the judge said if there's a right to possess it and use it, there must be a right to buy it legally. So that was the logic.
So just a question, just hypothetically, if, I guess I'm going to follow on the whole pharmacy thing. Are you saying that it's possible that one day Walgreens or Safeway will have,
Possible.
I mean, is that what you're saying?
Possible.
As soon as they have alcohol.
So as a response to that, there was some pending state legislation. As you know, the legislature convened, I guess today technically, but starts tomorrow. And there was pending legislation, and as of yesterday, it was going to treat medical marijuana dispensaries just like liquor. There was going to be a medical marijuana dispensary licensing authority, just like a liquor licensing authority, both on the state and the local level. As of this morning, that bill had been scrapped already because of pressure from law enforcement, and there's an entirely new bill that I haven't seen yet, but that's coming, that will be far more restrictive. I'm not sure if you've all been following in the news, but in the last week to 10 days, there have been 4 or 5 robberies of medical marijuana dispensaries, most recently in Boulder over the weekend, and there was a murder in Denver.
There was one murder.
Right. So I think what happened is law enforcement is now lobbying very hard on the legislature to be more restrictive. So my recommendation in the memo is that we adopt a 6-month moratorium to give us time to let the legislature do what it's going to do, and that way whatever we do, we're not going to have to redo in 6 months when the legislature is done. There is also pending federal legislation to remove medical marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act. But that's been pending for a year, and I don't think it's going anywhere. So
What would that do?
that would mean that medical marijuana, if used to treat a debilitating medical condition, would not violate the Controlled Substances Act. But as I said, that's been pending. It's not going
That
anywhere.
really wouldn't change the status quo here because you can't enforce that law anyway.
Well, now that the judge is ruling. But as I said, the judge's ruling in the Centennial case is not final. A lot of people expect it to be overturned on appeal. But for now, and it's not binding on us, I should point that out. This is an Arapahoe County District Court ruling. It is not binding on us. But it's indicative of how other courts may look at this situation.
Now, you mentioned something about home rule. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, depending on what the legislature does, I know some cities are taking the position that we don't care what the legislature does because we're home rule and this is land use. And as a home rule municipality, we get to deal with our land use authority as on our own. Because Superior is not home rule, whatever the state tells us to do in the next few months, we will need to do. We have no choice in the matter. If we were home rule, we may have more choice. It depends how they draft the legislation. It depends what happens in the Centennial case, because Centennial is home rule. The court in the Centennial case did not address the home rule argument at all. So that's still an open issue.
Is it an issue in that case?
It will be an issue in that case, but it
is
was
not yet.
raised by the parties but not decided by the court.
Is there a litigation risk over declaring a moratorium?
There is, but most of my colleagues and I believe the risk is far less from a moratorium than it would be from a simple, a ban, an outright ban. That the more consistently moratoria have been upheld in Colorado for cases like this where we're trying to enact land use regulations, but we need a little more time to do that, especially when we're waiting for the state to tell us how we have to do it. So the state is behind on this. The state legislature should have been doing this a while ago, but they didn't. So
And typically for moratoriums, is the time frame typically 6 months?
it's anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. The reason I've recommended 6 in this case is because of the legislature, because they technically meet until, they meet beyond 90 days. They could meet for as long as 6 months. So that's the reason for the 6 month. Generally, 6 months is the maximum.
Well, I would be in favor of the 6-month moratorium.
What is the zoning for a medical dispensary?
There is none.
We don't have
That's
that.
the thing, there isn't.
Wait. There is no specific zoning?
No.
No,
It doesn't matter.
it's too new.
It's too new. That's
That's the
exactly. It's
reason
a
why.
use that didn't exist at the time that our land use code was adopted, that didn't exist as a legal use, put it that way. And so there was no, so there was no way to zone them. So that would be something we would need to study during the 6-month moratorium in conjunction with following the state legislation is where can we put these, what makes sense in Superior if we have to have them, if the state is going to tell us. And that's pretty much a given, I think. The state is going to tell us we have to allow them. It's just
If we have the zoning for it.
No.
the state's going to tell us we have to have
Okay.
zoning for it.
That's
So
what
we
I
are going to
was
have to allow
wondering,
them
that angle.
somewhere.
And the remaining control is you will have the ability to say where they can and cannot go.
So we can do distance, I'm guessing, again, this is what the state legislature does, but usually they'll impose some distance requirements from schools, parks, daycare, those types of things. But there must be, I think what it's going to end up like sexually oriented businesses, that we have to allow them someplace in town.
And would they also have to circulate, who knows what, liquor licensing, you have to circulate a petition for the wants and needs of the community.
Yeah, that wasn't included in the legislation. That was actually sort of a running joke among municipal attorneys. But whether we were going to have a wants and needs petition for medical marijuana dispensaries. But
Right, because that would be the analogy with the liquor license.
right. So the licensing scheme was the same. There was no such petition requirement in the draft that I saw. So, and this may come back in some form. But Senator Romer was saying today that it was going to be far more restrictive than his original bill. So we'll see.
And is medical marijuana a Schedule 1, 2, or
It's a
3
Schedule
drug?
1.
It's a Schedule 1?
Which
And
means
aren't
that
there
there's no-
laws and regulations regarding the Schedule 1?
Controlled Substance Act, which means that there's no medical use for it, and it's not been found to be safe or effective.
So there's no way it can be classified as pharmacy then?
Well,
Well, yes, that's what the judge
Could be
said
by a judge.
basically.
it could be though.
According to the judge, that because Centennial's definition of pharmacy was rather vague, according to the judge, he would fit that in to be a pharmacy. But pharmacies weren't allowed where Canamart was anyway, so Canamart was going to have to move. So that, and part of the problem, what I think you're identifying, Trustee Williams, is that, yes, it is prohibited under federal law, but the judge found that that didn't matter because we are not empowered as municipalities to enforce federal law.
So let me, Yulia, I know that you had a question. So this brought some interesting constitutional issues to my mind. So with the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution, which says that federal law obviously supersedes any local or state law or constitution.
Right.
And so the constitutional thinking is that because the Attorney General said he wouldn't enforce it,
Yes.
even though it's against the law, that the judge then thought that the supremacy clause wouldn't apply here.
Right.
Exactly.
I
Seemed
don't quite follow the
Seemed
logic.
convoluted to me.
Yeah, it is convoluted, and I don't understand how an opinion of the Attorney General saying we're not going to enforce it is equivalent to amending a law. It's just simply not.
Right, because
Because
the next
3
Attorney
years
General
or-
might say,
Exactly.
well, I am going to enforce it.
Enforce it.
Then
And
what
then-
do? You take it out of the
Well,
land
then
use
it's gonna
code?
be-
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's the difficulty that's presented by this case and by the
Yeah.
judge's ruling.
I suspect that this is going to be appealed
Yes.
on a couple of
Multiple times.
occasions.
Yes. It's unclear now whether there'll be an interlocutory appeal at this point or whether they will actually have a trial and appeal it late. So We're still, sorry, interlocutory appeal means in the middle of the case.
Thank you.
So Centennial could appeal
know
it
that
right
one?
now.
Neither did
It's like A&E, you know? That was like a
Sorry.
television station.
How deep are the pockets?
So that would be an appeal right now in the middle of the case rather than letting the case play itself out. Or if the parties will wait and see how the case plays itself out after there's a trial and everything else, and then decide whether to appeal.
And would there be some, I mean, is someone planning an amicus brief, you know, from
Yes.
the...
Many
are.
Yes, are preparing. And that may not come until the appellate case is filed, if an appeal is filed. Then that's where the amicus briefs may come in, or they may come in sooner. Where I did speak with Centennial's attorney last Thursday, and they were still in the midst of trying to figure out what to do, as you can understand.
Sorry, Ely, I interrupted
Oh,
you.
so for us to issue a moratorium, what needs to be done?
We'll prepare an ordinance. There are two ways to do it. We can do it as a regular ordinance. The town only requires one reading. What most cities are doing is they're doing these as emergency ordinances, so they are effective immediately. They are passed and adopted the night that they're read and considered by the board, and they become effective immediately.
So let's say on the 25th, perhaps?
Yes.
Yes.
And we don't have any applications pending, I assume?
No.
Yeah, so that seems like that would be a
But
safe
I can
approach.
tell you, the list of ailments now has grown tremendously. It isn't just for cancer. Yeah, it's
Migraines.
migraine, insomnia, anxiety, chronic
Chronic.
pain.
Chronic pain
I can
is
go. The list has
Yeah,
grown.
everybody has chronic.
Appetite. I didn't hear that.
For, yeah, people who have problems with, yeah.
Oh, they get the munchies. And
At 10 o'clock at night, they
So again,
Good for
the two-pronged strategy that we're recommending, again, is the 6-month moratorium based on the board's original guidance, which was, we don't want them in Superior. So that gives you the cover that for the next 6 months, we would not be accepting any applications, as both the court cases and the legislation continue to wrestle through their appropriate processes. The second one was in anticipation that something might come forward, whether it's state legislation or a definitive court ruling, that we at least be prepared to establish the kind of restrictions that the town would want. As an example, not allowable in a residential zoning district.
Right.
Maybe in a commercial zoning district, and you have a few different commercial zoning districts. You have CAC, you have RAC. You have industrial, you have office. So we're suggesting that the Planning Commission take up that tact, as well as what other appropriate restrictions, as Kendra just indicated. Distance from schools, daycare centers, distance from one another, a number of different things that would be very defensible and logical. And we're suggesting that we task the Planning Commission to take that on during the course of the next 6 months.
And that is actually required. While we have a moratorium, we can't just sit back and wait. We will also need to do some work on our own, and I think what Town Manager has said is that we would task the Planning Commission with doing that. There are some other things. You can also adopt regulations similar to pawn shops, requiring a registry book and, you know, a list of all transactions in and out, and there's a lot more regulation that we could adopt, or we could at least consider adopting right now, until the legislature decides whether we can or we can't.
I think once again, I think the judge's ruling makes no sense whatsoever. But I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer, don't play one on television, but it's just logically speaking, the logic seems convoluted.
I agree.
But the moratorium and the discussion about zoning makes sense. Now, remind me, since everything in Superior essentially is PUD, is it the sort of the general thing that's in that area that would apply?
While the vast majority of the community is zoned PUD, you have underlying zoning districts throughout.
Right.
You would do it
I know
as
that
part of
we
the
have-
underlying zoning district.
Because, I mean, in the Rock Creek PUD, we have those things, but like in the, I don't remember what the zone is for
Superior Marketplace
Marketplace. Isn't that a PUD?
has, yes, but it also has an underlying zoning
It
district.
does, okay. It's been so long, I haven't thought about that. Okay.
Yeah, maybe one of these places will work really well in the sheriff's office.
Right, maybe next
Right
door.
next door,
Right
you
next
know?
door.
or the new expanded fire department.
Yeah, there you go. Got an extra room.
I'd pose the soon-to-be vacated large commercial space on the other side of the bridge, but
Okay, well, I can't think of anything else, so you want to move through
we'll
your...
proceed on that tact.
Yeah.
Matt will be working with the Planning Commission on the appropriate zoning restrictions, and we'll bring forward an ordinance in an emergency fashion. Any special approvals required in 2 weeks? Unanimous?
No, I believe it's recorded. I'll have to look.
Okay.
But I'll have that at the time. But
It'll probably require a supermajority vote in order to be approved on one reading.
Okay. All right, do you have your list there?
Very briefly, for the next meeting, agenda item D is the zoning and annexation, reverse order, annexation and zoning of the Madsen property. Now that we've completed that transaction, this was a case that actually was considered by the Planning Commission at last Tuesday night, at which time those in attendance unanimously recommended approval of both the annexation and the zoning of that particular property. That'll be coming for the board tonight on preliminary reading and for final action 2 weeks from tonight. Based on our discussions back in November, we anticipate bringing forward 3 separate resolutions regarding the proposed ballot initiatives for the April municipal ballot. The first would be the library tax levy. The second one would be the consolidation or the moving of municipal elections to November, as well as a transition plan if it were to be successful, as one ballot question rather than 2. And then publication of municipal ordinances by title only. And we talked again about all of those in November. F, based on their discussions tonight, I'm sorry.
I think for 2 of those, the language is moderately clear, but for the library one, I think we still need to come up with some discussion of the board about just either how specific the language is going to be or how specific our plan and therefore our communication is going to be so that it's not a vague thing again. So does that mean you need a work session? Do you think we can do something like that in a meeting? It seems hard to me, but...
Yeah, that was going to be my recommendation, that we'd probably talk about, I think it's going to be a longer discussion regarding library, and I think I would use the vast majority of the time for the work session devoted to that, just to make sure, if it's quick, then we have some time on our hands, but otherwise, it's probably time well spent.
I recognize that the discussion we had in November was not unanimous, and the composition of the board's changing. So do you want to have it as a workshop item? Then so be it. Clearly, the board's guidance in November was a certain way, but if you want to discuss it.
Right.
I think the question really that Lisa's bringing up is our language clear enough that voters understand
And
what we're
specific enough.
what we're asking them to do? Because we had a prior initiative turned down because library services was feedback, or the sense is that was turned down because it was too vague as to what people were asked to give their money for.
And I don't think that, I think that's an excellent point. I think that I'd frame this as that we're talking about the ballot language, not what the long-term library plan is going to be, since that's in flux.
Okay.
And as you all understand, we're stuck with Tabor.
Tabor.
So the
Right, so
first
it
half
doesn't-
of it's going to make no sense anyway. So,
Right.
So let's
But
just
you-
ignore Tabor along with the...
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure, there you
Well,
go.
let's put a moratorium on Tabor.
But we do get to provide input on titles as well, and that's not completely
Titles
done by
and-
Tabor, and so I'd like to make sure
Sure.
we have a decent title for it and things like that.
Sure. And by the way, it's a 3/4 majority that's required for an emergency ordinance.
Oh.
Just so you know.
Okay.
Engineering services, based on our discussion earlier this evening, I do not anticipate that coming forward, no need. And G&H are both placeholders. We're making great progress on the PPA regarding the ground-mounted solar installations. We hope to be in a position to have a contract ready for presentation in 2 weeks, and we'd also anticipated that being a discussion item if we can bring it to closure. And candidly, the issues that we're dealing with have to do with the amortization schedule associated with the value, as well as how quickly the town can assume ownership of the particular units that would be installed on town-owned property. And we're intently negotiating those. So hopefully we'll be in a position to bring both of those to you.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Anything else that you had?
A couple of items from the digest. One was the library discussion. That may be appropriate as well in 2 weeks, but whether the board wants to encourage a groundswell of advocates. Obviously, the town is limited in what it can do beyond education. The FYI regarding Kurt's scheduled neighborhood meeting with Original Town north of the creek regarding street options for the 2010 capital improvement program. The recycling center drop-off closure, and it was anecdotal, but staff was out there to make sure that the structure and all had been removed and had some conversations with those in closest proximity, and they were very appreciative of its departure. The US 36 Record of Decision has been completed, which is a precursor towards the acceptance of any federal funding. And as we also had indicated, the Tiger Grant applications have been submitted, and we've been led to believe that there will be a decision made during the month of January. So the fact that we've gotten the ROD bolsters our case for some federal funding. That's all I have.
Anything else before the meeting? Okay, let's say goodbye then.
As a related matter, maybe not related, but Cheech and Chong are going to be putting on a show at Mackey Auditorium. Seriously.
Good timing.
They are coming.
All right.
So.
Thank you.
So this is all they're doing for
Like real?
Welcome, everybody, and Happy New Year to everybody. I'd like to call to order a Town of Superior Board of Trustees and Superior Metropolitan District Number 1 Board of Directors and Superior McCaslin Interchange Metropolitan District Board of Directors and the Superior Urban Renewal Authority Board of Commissioners for January 11th, 2010. And Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
I think we're going to do
I think actually swearing in is first. And then,
No?
yes.
Oh, okay.
You want to?
That's fine.
Reverse it?
That doesn't make any difference to me.
Okay.
So then, item number 2, Mr. Kuffner was recently appointed to the town board, and this would be the time that we would swear him in. So George, come on down. Take your seat up here at the dais.
Yeah, you bring all your stuff with you. You're going to lose that. There's no getting him out of here after you take the oath.
Switch chairs, too?
Yep. You're going to have to run that thing.
Right.
This makes it 5 minutes.
I'm glad you should regret.
There you go.
Okay, so we'll do the oath of office. So just raise your right hand, and then I'll read it, but you just say, I, George Kuffner, and then I'll read the rest and say, I do. I
George Kuffner.
do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Colorado, and faithfully perform the duties of the office of Board of Trustees upon which I am about to enter.
I do.
Very good. Congratulations, George. And it sounds like you just married all of us.
I appreciate it. I'll do the best of my abilities. That's all I can say.
That's all we can all do.
No, you will.
Mr.
And,
Mayor, if you
so-
wouldn't mind, we need to now take a brief recess
Yes,
and
so
do the
that's what I
Improvement
was-
Foundation, and then we'll come back.
Exactly. So what's going to happen here, just for the viewing public, that we have a variety of different entities that trustees fill, and to do that, since we're talking about all those, well, most all of those tonight, we need to have people, George, sign some documents prior to all that. So how long do you think that would take? 5?
5 minutes, and if the rest of the trustees would remain where you are, because we'll actually be in a Superior Improvement Foundation meeting. That's not a public meeting. It's just in order to approve the land contract. So,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Sign away.
Keep signing, George.
Okay, so we have 2 more oaths, George,
I'm sorry, before we do the oaths, we have to approve the land contract.
and that has to be a motion.
Yes, you're now the Superior Improvement Foundation. So we need a motion.
Motion to approve the land contract with Mr. Kuffner by trustee Skumat, second by trustee Gregouris. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Now he'll sign that land conveyance contract.
Okay, so now you
So now he owns the part of the roundabout at the...
1/7.
Right.
Do we have to see the state
How
plan?
much is that worth?
a few years ago.
So damage has
When I take- Yes.
I think it's a great trivia question for the community about how many roundabouts exist within the community.
Yes,
People
that's-
constantly forget about. Yeah.
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
He signed it now.
Okay.
They have to make a motion to appoint him?
You mean to submit an SMD1? Yes, we can come back into the regular meeting to do that, though. So,
But what about the oath of offices for SMIT and SMD1? When do I do those now?
yes. Well, we could do those after the oath of office is taken after the appointment.
Oh, okay.
So we can go back into the regular meeting if you're ready.
Okay, Shazam, we're back in the regular meeting.
Okay. Now we'll need motions for SMD1 and SMID to approve Mr. Kuffner as a director of each of those entities by 2 separate motions.
2 separate motions.
Sorry.
Okay, motion by trustee Skumatz to appoint Mr. Kuffner to SMD1. Was that the first one?
Sure.
Second by trustee Williams. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
And now you can do the oath of office in SMD1.
Okay, let's do this. Do the same as before. I
Hi, George Kuffner.
will faithfully support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Colorado and the laws made pursuant thereto, and will faithfully perform the duties of the office of Director of the Superior Metropolitan District Number 1, upon which I am about to enter.
I do.
And the next one is, I'm sorry.
For SMID.
SMID. Motion by trustee Skumatz to appoint appoint Mr. Kuffner to Superior McCaslin Interchange District, second by trustee D'Souza. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Okay, one more. For Smith, I
And urban renewal?
will faithfully support the
That's
Constitution
the-
of the United States and the state of Colorado and the laws made pursuant thereto, and will faithfully perform the duties of the office of director of the Superior McCaslin Interchange Metropolitan District upon which I am about to enter.
I do.
Okay, is that it for
That's it.
technicalities here? All right, I think I was at the calling of the roll.
Yes.
Phyllis.
Okay. Mayor Andrew Muckle,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lisa Skumatz,
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli,
Here,
Dana D'Souza,
Here.
Delia Gregoris,
Here.
George Kuffner,
Here.
Deborah Williams,
Here.
Town Manager Scott Randolph,
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry,
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Harden.
Thank you very much. With that, item number 4, which approve the agenda, are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Trustee Skumatz.
I have a question about G, so I think I'd like to relay
Okay, so we'll
G slightly.
move, what is 6G to follow the consent, 8G to follow the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Any other changes? Trustee Williams?
Yes. I have corrections to the OSAC minutes on B.
Are these, so our typical thing, if they're substantive, then they need to, I guess, go back to the OSAC for their approval, right, and then come back to the board?
Yes.
So if it's a simple correction.
If it's a simple correction, do it offline, and if it's more substantial, then back to OSAC.
Okay, it's written, I'm not sure exactly what page here, but it says that OSAC met with ConocoPhillips, and at that time, we had not met with ConocoPhillips.
So it needs to go back to us.
Yeah, so back to OSAC for their approval, and then come back to us. So, let's see.
So do we have to pull B or just those? Can we separate the minutes out?
Yeah, right, so the change to 8B is that the Open Space Advisory Committee meeting notes will not be approved tonight, will come back.
One moment.
But one moment. One moment, please.
Here we go. It says, Trustee D'Souza said the Open Space Advisory Committee met with ConocoPhillips, and in looking at the initial plans, they seem pretty pleased with the way the trail connections look. And ConocoPhillips plans to continue the trail connection from Superior under the highway and across the property to the city of Broomfield. At that time, we had not, it was,
Not the OSAC minutes, those are the regular board minutes.
Thank you.
The OSAC minutes say that the meeting is
Yeah,
respected.
it's will meet, yes.
sorry.
Okay, so,
All right, so we're good.
so we're good
it's
for it.
taken care of.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other changes?
Trying to get me in hot water.
Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with that change. Trustee Skumatz?
So moved.
Okay, motion to approve the agenda by trustee Skumatz. Is there a second by trustee Gregoris? Discussion, all in favor? Thank you. The agenda is approved. With that, item number 5, reports, questions, and issues. We'll start with Mr. Kuffner. Do you have anything to report for us tonight?
No, sir, I don't.
Thought as much. Trustee Sorelli?
I don't have anything to report. I have a question for Trustee D'Souza regarding Dr. Cog. The next meeting is when Dr. Cog is going to discuss the public meeting they had last month, right?
Actually vote, yeah.
And actually vote, so
Yeah.
there won't be any more comment from the public at that meeting. and-
It won't be the public hearing. I mean, the public comment to that part is over, but there will be general public comment, yeah.
Okay. Okay, trustee Skumatz.
Two things. One, I had an Energy Strategies Task Force subcommittee meeting, subcommittee of the Consortium of Cities, and one of the things that Boulder County, it looks like, is going to be doing is putting together, because they've done a whole lot of work in putting together some energy-related grants over the last X months, winning stuff with millions of dollars attached and such, they've sort of got some templates for grants that they could plug in different cities' names without, with very little effort. And a representative from GEO was at the meeting and was asked, if Boulder County sort of polled the cities and said, do you want to be in this grant? Do you want to be in that grant? That sort of thing. And submitted something like that to the GEO. Would that be favorably received? And they said, oh, definitely. And so I'm just letting staff know you might expect a call, or you might proactively call either Ann Livingston or Pam Milmo. She might be with the city. I can never remember city versus county, and I apologize for that. But in any case, they're the ones looking at putting together those template sort of grants for energy things. So I think it sounded like we would have a pretty good chance. The other is there's a Louisville Library Subcommittee meeting coming up in about a week or two, and one of the things is they're asking for an update from me on sort of ballot language, where we are in that, who are groups that would be pro or con, and what kind of assistance might we want, and that sort of stuff. So any input from the town or from other trustees, please give me a buzz. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I didn't attend a U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners meeting, but got the update. Basically talked about the record of decision for U.S. 36. Related to that, the town will be doing its lobbying trip this year. Seems to be the most important in terms of looking for monies at the federal level now that the ROD has been approved, and that'll be happening at the end of February. Went to the Metro Mayor's meeting this weekend, and always interesting. There's a variety of topics that were talked about. The main one was that the new RTD director was there, giving an overview of where Fast Tracks is at the moment. He seems to be a very good director, and actually was favorably impressed by him. But the downside is that there's even less money around that they were anticipated, and so they're thinking that they're probably $2.5 billion short to finish the project. And that to fill that gap, they're hoping for $1 billion from the federal government, and he seemed to believe that that was going to occur, and was going to recommend a ballot question. The directors hadn't approved this yet, but it's anticipated that in November 2010 there would be a ballot language to raise the RTD fast track sales tax, basically double it, in order to complete the project within a reasonable time frame, which was about 10 years. So that's all I had. Trustee D'Souza.
There were just I did attend an open space meeting with Louisville, but I was only there a short time, so I'll let Trustee
I have plenty to
discuss that
say.
one. I did have a question on the notes on the Prostax minutes about the youth advisory position, and I just had a question whether that was going to be open, if you were going to open that up to everyone or not. So, if you
I'm going to make a comment
Sure.
today.
Okay.
I believe that there's somebody here that might be able to speak to that.
Maybe finish and come back.
Jim Payne, 2475 Clayton Circle, Chair of ProStack. The idea is that we've had a resignation recently. He had served in the capacity of an at-large position where the other 8 are have specific advocacies, 2 parks, 2 trails.
Okay.
So the idea was to replace that with a youth advocate who would be specifically focused on advocating for youth sports and rec. We have one of our members who has expressed interest in that position, so our plan is to move John Craycraft into that
Oh, okay.
youth advocacy, and then as we recruit a new member, it would be, I believe John is a rec advocate now, so that would be the opening. But the members have also expressed interest in doing a little bit more with those advocacy positions, and the thought was to once a year, sort of open it up for members at that time to see what they'd like to do for that year and possibly make some adjustments each year, depending on whatever the members' priorities were, to make them a little bit more meaningful.
Okay. One of the reasons I have gotten a couple of interested youth who were wondering about the youth advocacy committee that is, I don't know if it's really on the book still or where it stands, but I know it hasn't been meeting, and so I didn't know if that was something that you were going to try and
Well, it's
involve
come up,
actually
and
youth with it, or
we've
or
had
how?
some people involved in advocacy for some of the 3 parks amenities that had been involved with that in the past, and that was one of the reasons we came up with this, since most of what they've had to deal with has been rec, Parks and Rec related. We thought this would help address that. But in any event, it would help give us a focus within the ProStack for addressing the needs of youth, since most of the suggestions and interests that have come from the town have been youth-related, actually, over the last couple of years. So I think it would sort of address that, and we may find that that's sufficient, or the board may want to do something else. But if you had a youth advocacy group, it would have so much overlap
Yeah.
anyway that I
Right.
think this is a good way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Skumatz?
My only question was that youth advocacy position potentially open to youth?
Yeah, that was.
That's a different issue. I don't, I'd rather, my personal, off the top of my head, the way to address that would be, I think, to have people, audit the meetings or have some sort of a youth position where they would come and participate. I'm not against it. We haven't looked at it that way, but my general experience is that doesn't always work very well over a long period of time. The other thing is there's a learning curve on any of these committees, and it takes a while for them to really get in, to get really familiar with what's going on, and that tends not to work with youth members.
Thanks.
Now, the member who left for work reasons had, James Ricker, who, was fairly young when he got on board and did very well, but he wasn't a high school age. He was a little bit older.
So, but you
Aged quite a bit.
would encourage, though, youth who were interested or had a particular issue to
Yeah, we
come.
always
I mean,
do.
there are always open meetings, and so they could always come and.
Right, and a lot of Monarch students have participated. We're always encouraging that. Sure, absolutely. And there may be some way we can formalize that a little bit more, but I don't know if having them be one of the members would be the best way to go unless a real special case came along.
Okay. So procedure, since this has come up procedurally, then I believe that we need to relabel. I don't remember what our enabling language looked like for these. I guess I probably should have looked that up, but for the next meeting, we just need to make sure we don't need to change the enabling resolution to list this as one of the things, and then to appoint that person, and then to recruit then for the open position.
I
So
believe it is in the resolution.
I think it is, so we need to have a change for the resolution. Director Dominguez. Yes, you can say something.
Juanita Dominguez, Director of Parks, Recreation, Open Space. In the agenda item, here in a few minutes, you'll look at the ProStack work plan, and they've actually put as number 7, actually recommending to eliminate the advocacies on the resolution. And so this will come back as a recommendation from ProStack to say, we have the group of 9, we'd like to internally use the advocacies and change those annually.
I see, so that everybody would be at large, and the group itself would assign people to specific tasks?
Right, and they would do it annually as part of their work plan, and they would change advocacies each year. And youth would be one of those, so.
Okay. Well, either way, it sounds like we'll need to change the resolution no matter what, so. And then we'll be out for publication that we have an opening.
Have a vacancy on ProStack.
Okay, thanks.
I just had two other things regarding DRCOG. One about the Jefferson Parkway, and if any residents, we're planning on, the town as the DRCOG representative will be voting against recommending that go through, and also for regional reasons as well, I'll be voting against that. And if anyone has any questions and wants to talk to me about that, since it does come very close to us, feel free to call me or email me on that one. And then the other thing is just the census, and DRCOG is very interested that people fill out the census. It's something that's the way we get funding for roads. It's also with schools, and any of the federal things is based on population. So it's very important that when that comes up, that people please send those back in.
Okay. Trustee Gregorius.
3 quick items. The first one is, I just want to make everyone aware that we had a great collaborative effort, the town, the homeowners association, and Kevin with the church, Cool River Church, to a tremendous toy drive. And I'm going to let Steve, when you have a chance, to give some of the details. But I think it goes to show you that when this town unites, we can do tremendous things that benefit our citizens, and it was very well received. He has a lot more personal story that you might want to share. And I think I would hope that the future of Superior looks this way, that we all work together for a common cause, because there are a lot of things we can come together. The second thing is, just as a FYI, we had a major change in the HOA structure. Grant Jacobs resigned. He sold his home. He no longer has a residence in Rock Creek, so he resigned, and Steve Smith was elected as president unanimously. And number 3, my son came here a couple weeks ago, I guess before the holidays. He's doing I guess since we have a Boy Scout and a Cub Scout here, he's doing his Eagle project, and he's collecting books for underprivileged kids, for inner city youth in Los Angeles. He's already collected close to 500 books, and today he placed a collection box right here and one at Superior Elementary. So for the next 2 weeks, if you have any books that you do not need, ages for 4 to 14 more or less, if you wouldn't mind either dropping them off here or at the school, or just letting him know, and we can come and pick it up from your home as well. That would be great.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations to him.
Who gets to ship those out?
That's another issue. We have to, we
It's a
have
fundraiser project.
fundraiser project. Yeah, that's, we'll come to that.
California. Trustee Williams.
I went to a ConocoPhillips meeting with Superior, Broomfield, and Louisville Open Space Advisory Boards. And we discussed their open space and trails dedication for public use in their PUD that was submitted in November to the Louisville City Council. And some of the same questions that we had, the other municipalities had the exact same questions, and as far as issues also. And those were the amount of public open space. They had it at around 40 acres, which is about 12%, which we thought was a little lower than we anticipated. However, their private common open space is 212 acres, and that is within the closed, secure campus. So, which brought another concern when they said closed and secure. It means it's going to be fenced and manned at all entry points. So we kind of discussed how the trail access around the property might feel when you have fencing right next to it. So we were interested in knowing how the enjoyment of the trail might be. So we discussed that. We also discussed the trail connectivity to the regional trails in the area. And Louisville and Superior and Broomfield all had concerns with that. They wanted to find out who would be constructing the trails from the property to the regional trails. And we didn't really get a great answer on that, but this is just preliminary at this point, so we'll just have to see where they go with that. And then we were also concerned about traffic access on Campus Drive, and they ConocoPhillips was interested in extending Campus Drive east to 96th Street for better access for themselves, for the schools, Monarch schools, and the hospital. And if that should occur, that would certainly alleviate traffic in that area. So it was a great meeting, and we were very excited to talk with them. So we'll see where we go with that and how their progress is with the Louisville City Council.
Great, thanks.
So I just had something to add on with that. One of the, it wasn't the traffic plan wasn't on their preliminary plan, but they did purchase some properties to gain access out to 96. The other nice thing too is that they do plan on restoring prairie style all the way around, and they're also going to at their own
Not prairie
expense.
dogs, though.
Not prairie dogs, prairie grasslands. And at their own expense, they're going to underground those power lines that are all along there.
really?
So they'll be doing that. And also the US 36 bike pathway that goes across there, they will be trying to connect into that is expected to go along. That's on that one.
Great, thanks. Trustee Skomatsu had
I
something.
neglected to mention one thing that came out of the Energy Strategies Task Force item, and that was that, I can't remember whether it was March or May, but in one of those 2 months, the commercial climate smart loans are going to be due, applications are going to be due. So that means that, if any of the businesses in our town want to apply for monies that they can get, or loans that they can get through this program, that's going to be the timing, and it's a pretty cool loan and lots of money and that sort of thing. The other is, and the residential application period will be short after that in the second half of the year. So
Notifications of business would occur through what mechanism? Just
I don't know. That's why I want to mention it. And if staff is talking with businesses here in town, it would be great if you'd let them know about that program, because I'm not sure how the word is going to be getting out.
maybe we could, I assume that the chamber has some sort of email distribution
That would
we
be
could
great.
send that out.
Thank you.
I had one other one that I'll just let the manager talk about. We spent some quality time on a snowy day talking about the Boulder Valley School District budget, but I'll leave that to the manager.
I guess last Wednesday.
What a segue. The mayor and I have been invited by Superintendent King to serve on his superintendent's budget advisory task force. I didn't realize what a long commitment it was. We'll be meeting on a monthly basis, 2 hours, 1 day a month, now through the end of June, in an effort to deal with some of the school districts' finances, but also apparently this committee is also going to be engaged on a number of other things, including future bond issues, enrollment projections, and a number of very substantive items. So looking forward to it. There's a group of about 33, but Superior is represented by at least the 2 of us. There may well have been some other Superior residents in there in at-large positions. I'd given the board an update at the end of December, recognizing that our our calendar year, fiscal year, ended December 31st, but we won't be closing the books until almost the end of February. We should be getting December sales tax receipts in by the middle of February, closing out and being able to give the board a definitive number. But as a result of some very pertinent, very positive upticks, sales tax, building permits, utility taxes, and a number of other, even interest income, we expect to end the year certainly in a surplus position. We've been estimating in excess of $100,000 a year based on the things that we were seeing through the month of December. Mr. Nillis and I have increased that to at least a surplus of $250,000. And I'm expecting that it'll change. It'll change some between now and the end of February, but much better. And you'll remember that when we began the year, I think it was in late February or early March, when we presented the contingency budget, we were looking at deficits of anywhere from $500,000 to $800,000. So both revenue enhancements as well as a number of expense cuts. We managed it. We ended the year in the black. We ended the year in the black very, very well, and we'll have you a definitive number by the end of February.
And when you say that we're in the black, our revenue obviously is different from our expense versus revenue line. Do you have a flavor about how revenues are?
Each one was different. Order of magnitude, revenues were probably down real quick, $400,000 throughout the course of the year. Expenses were down well over $800,000. We had budgeted a surplus, but department heads did an exceptional job in terms of managing their operating lines. Some of our third-party contracts, and you're aware of the issues that we took throughout the course of the year, but we ended in the black.
Congratulations to town staff about that. Town attorney?
Nothing for me. You've heard my report. It's all medical marijuana.
Town clerk? George.
I don't know if this is an appropriate place and there, but I have a question.
Sure.
An issue
Yeah?
pertaining to the house on 2nd Avenue in Coal Creek, Bennett and Vanelli
Okay.
home. I'd like to get that put on the agenda so we can discuss, so we can get something moving down the road on that.
Anything specific, or, I mean?
Well,
like
the
zoning or-
specific is, they'd like to put it on a foundation or either a basement, and as it is right now, they would have to pay the fees for the water and the sewer. So if we could waiver that until they got their CO before they move in, so they could get their ducks in a row to get their financing. If they get the house on a foundation or footers, they can get their financing, but the economy's down right now. You know that as well as I do. So if the town could issue them a permit to put it on, move it on a foundation, we'd get something going. And I have been in contact with her. I don't, her personally. I know it's been dragging on a year, and I'd like to help move it along.
I guess the best way to do
Go
that is
through
to have them write us a letter or be in contact with town staff about exactly what they're
Okay?
suggesting. I mean, off the top of my head, delaying paying SDFs would be concerning to me, but I'm willing to look at whatever they're suggesting, I guess.
I appreciate that. And I'll get with the town manager and get with them a letter too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right. So with that, we're at item number 6, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items.
Good evening, Steve Smith, 653 Eden Circle. George, I'm in your seat, so if I need to move, just let me know.
No, you're fine. It's different looking this way from that way.
So anyway, in addition to Ilya's comments about the toy drive, I'm hoping that this becomes something that is part of Superior for the long term. When you see a single mom struggling to feed her children and you drop off a bicycle and all the food that was generated by other charities, and she's in tears because of the help in our own backyard, you really get quite moved. I think one of the things that we learned from this is it's not just about the toys. We need to probably expand this to other things, because the number of people in this community, surrounding communities, that are hurting financially was shocking. And I think that on the sadder side of this, that while we did a great thing, we could have done a lot better. And I think that if we get with the town and really organize this thing, this could really turn out to be something very beneficial for the whole community. Louisville and Lafayette also received some of the surplus of what happened in this. So again, I want to thank the town for their involvement in this. Without that box being out front, I don't think it would have been nearly as successful as it was. Knowing that many of the private businesses won't participate in these type of programs anymore for whatever reason, it's nice to know that's available. So I just wanted to comment on that, and again, thank everybody. I also want to publicly thank personally Grant Jacobs for all of the great things he's done for our community. He, I believe, formed the Kiwanis Club in our community, as well as had a lot of different programs for the youth in our community that he was directly involved in, and he'll be greatly missed as a participant in all those things. And at some point, he'll be more formally thanked by the Rock Creek HOA board. With that said, we're in a new group of people. The majority of our board has changed over. We've got a great group of directors, with Ian joining us now. He also has been elected as an officer of our board, so I look forward to a lot more closer relationships with the HOA and the town, trying to work together in the future, and thank you for that. And then on a personal note, with the closing the Sam's Clubs, while that's a negative thing for those families. There's a great opportunity for this town to, I think, try and get membership up over Costco. So I would like to work with the town, not knowing the relationship with Costco, at least to put out some information in the HOA newsletter with the permission of our board to try and promote an increase in membership. I don't know if Costco will be willing to reduce their membership with a valid Sam's Club card, but anything that brings more revenue, Mayor, as you had just stated, to this town would be a great benefit. So anything we can do to help communicate that, and if there's something that the town's going to do to work with Costco to promote those things, we would help do. And then on the final note, the mayor had written a outstanding letter, if you didn't get a chance to read it right before the first of the year, thanking the volunteers in this community. A lot of the good things that happen in this community are the result of some great volunteers, and I'm honored to be a part of those people and the people that I've worked with, and humbled by the little that I do compared to the amazing things that they have done. So, Mayor, thank you for the nice letter.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Additional public comment?
Chris and Ian Hansen, 5380 Eaton Circle. We're also with PAC 278 here in Superior. We wanted to extend a formal invitation to the entire board. This coming Saturday, we have our annual Pinewood Derby event.
Cool.
And we'd especially like the mayor to be a part of that and at least kick us off in the beginning.
What time is that?
It starts at 9 a.m. at El Dorado.
So I will try. I'm unfortunately working both days this weekend, but I will see what I can work out. That would be great.
What day is that?
It's this coming Saturday
Okay.
at El Dorado Middle School. It'll go from 9 till about 12 or 1. There'll be refreshments there, and it's a lot of fun. But even if you were there for 5 minutes, we'd love to have you.
I loved watching Pinewood Derby contests when I was a kid. So that was pretty. So.
And is this open to the public?
Yeah, absolutely.
Come? So
Yeah.
if you can let, just, again, at 9 a.m. This Saturday?
9 a.m. This Saturday, January 16th, from 9 a.m. to about 12 or 1.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know. Additional public comment?
A lot of scorching 404 South Third Avenue. Maybe something can be put on CAC about their derby. I just wanted to ask a question. You mentioned 8G was pulled. Is 8G I heard was pulled, and I'm interested in commenting on 8F. Was both of them or just one of them pulled?
Just
G was pulled. Just G, but we could either talk about it now or then. It doesn't make any, whatever your pleasure is.
Well, whichever you tell me.
Now it's good.
Okay, I'm concerned about 8F, which is the Madison annexation. I have one question as to why property is purchased for annexation before the ordinance is passed. Could I have that process explained to me why?
I didn't quite get the question. I'm sorry.
Well, I have been told, it was stated at the Planning Commission meeting the other night, that the property has already been purchased by the town of Superior, and that's also in this, in the packet.
Mm-hmm.
So why is the property purchased before this annexation ordinance is passed?
I think you can go either way. I'm not. Did you have concerns about?
I don't understand why it's purchased before the ordinance is passed. Why is that?
Why doesn't it occur all three together?
Well, I mean,
Purchase, annexing, and zoning.
Well, we purchased the property first, and that enables us to annex the property as the property owner. It's an easier process to annex it when we own the property.
Rather than Madison annexing it?
Exactly.
Okay, and so educate me as to why it is easier for the town than it is for Madison.
There are different requirements for municipally owned property to be annexed into a town, and they are less stringent than the requirements for a private property owner to annex into the town. That's pursuant to the state statute.
And so who approved the purchase? Was it?
Town board.
And so it was done in an executive session then?
No?
No, 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 no.
When was it done?
I don't know. So I don't
It
know
was
off the
like
top of
November
my 6 weeks
14th or
ago. I
something?
don't remember exactly.
Okay, all right. That was the purchase of it. Okay, and then it was purchased with lottery money, is that correct?
No.
Open
It was
space.
Open space money.
And that's not lottery money?
No, that's
Sales
our,
tax.
that's our,
That's the tax, the open space tax money?
in bonds, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then I had one other question about, I guess a comment about number 9 on the agenda. Excuse me, it is number 11 on the agenda. Sorry about that.
Okay, so I guess I'll let you wait till that one comes forward then.
Okay,
Just-
thanks.
Thanks.
George,
There's no
did you want to say
public
something,
hearing
or
for
did
that.
you?
Shouldn't she talk about that now?
11?
There's no public hearing for number 11.
What's your concern? We always talk,
Consent
public
agenda.
comment is usually during the agenda item.
Okay.
George thinks that something needs to be said about an incident that's happened here in Original Town on,
Okay, George?
George?
What do you have to say?
What'd you have to say?
on January 3rd, a very long-time resident passed away. And it is a very sad, sad, sad scenario because of the fact that there is no money to have her cremated. There is no money. She is laid at the morgue now for over a week because the family has no money to cremate her. Original Town has a custom that when there is a death or an incident or whatever, why residents take up donations. We have collected $150 from Original Town residents, and that money will be given to the family. But her son declared bankruptcy, his credit card's maxed out. Her daughter has physical problems, hasn't been able to work for several months. They've gone to social services. Social services will not help them in any way. So if there's anybody that has any secrets of getting money to get this family some help, we're open to hearing from you in Original Town.
Maybe somebody from the media would be happy to publish something about that.
He
That would be, that's the way to
was
do it.
going to check today with Para, and I don't know what Della found out about that, but anyway, that's a crisis in Original Town.
Thank you for sharing that. Additional public comment? Seeing none, item number 7, presentations. We don't have any this evening. That brings us to item number 8, and on the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of December 14th, 2009 meeting, acceptance of the minutes of the Planning Commission, the Open Space Advisory Committee, and the Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails Advisory Committee meetings, adoption of a resolution approving public posting locations for the town's Superior Metcaslin Interchange Metropolitan District, Superior Metropolitan District Number 1, and Superior Urban Renewal Authority, approval of a liquor license renewal for Sushi Yoshi Restaurant, adoption of a resolution approving the appointments of a director and an alternate to the Rocky Flat Stewardship Council, and approval of preliminary approval of an ordinance annexing the Madsen property. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee Gregoris. Discussion? Let's see. I'm looking. Are we spending any money here? I don't think that we are.
No.
So, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to what was item G, preliminary approval of an ordinance zoning the Madsen property. And Trustee Skumatz, I believe this was for you.
Yes, I just had a couple of questions about the zoning. So I'll admit to my ignorance, I don't know exactly if OS-N is the same designation as the properties that we own with Boulder County?
Yes, and the Arsenal property. And in fact, the OSN zoning district was created about 18 to 24 months ago. It is the most restrictive classification that you have. You may remember the discussion. There was about the only permitted use is fencing on that particular property.
So that's what I was going to ask. It doesn't allow trails or anything like that? Just asking. I'm not.
I don't recall.
Not a troublemaker. Just
Matt, do you?
just literally
Mr.
don't
Magdalene?
know that question.
Assistant Town Director.
Happy New Year. Matt Magley, town staff. It does allow for trails, paved, unpaved, trailheads, fencing, and then some, because of state laws,
Thanks.
wells.
But it's consistent with all the other.
It is.
All the other town-owned
Thank you.
open space.
That was my only question.
Okay. So, any other questions about this? I'll entertain a motion to approve by trustee Skumatz.
I'd like to, do I need to read
Yep,
this?
go ahead, yeah.
I'd like to approve Town of Superior Ordinance Number O-.
No, it's just
Just the preliminary approval.
So,
Sure.
so there's no number.
Series 2010, an ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior zoning the Madison property open space and natural uses.
Motion by trustee Skumatz, second by trustee Sorelli. Discussion regarding this. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 9, public hearing and approval of system development fees for the Superior Metropolitan District Number 1. With that, I'll open the public hearing. And Phyllis, you have proof of publication?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I will take your word for that. Okay. Mr. Randall?
Very brief introduction, then I'll turn the table over to Mr. Nilles, who'll give you a more detailed presentation. The board may recall that in December, your workshop session was dominated by a presentation by Red Oak Consulting, our consulting firm that had been engaged almost 18 months ago in which to review, validate, and recommend system development fees. The system development fees are actually the charges, as referred to earlier, but the charges for new users to tap into the town's utility system, the water plant, the sewer plant, the lines, the storm sewer system, the irrigation water system, and the like. Again, this was a study that has gone on for over 18 months. It received a lot of discussion during that workshop session. We're going to be focusing on Appendix A tonight, which has to do with the rate structure. And without further ado, I'll ask Paul to go ahead and make his presentation. Then we'd be glad to answer any questions that the board may have or the public may have.
Thank you very much.
While Mr. Nellis is coming up, I do have the proof of publication.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Nellis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Randall, Paul Nellis, town staff. We'll keep this brief concerning as a manager had identified less than a month ago. The board spent about an hour on this particular topic. Generally, the only other background information I'd like to provide is the board in its capacity, the Board of Trustees in its capacity as the Board of Directors for SMD number 1, has essentially adopted these tap fees from the old district board. So essentially, they are 9 years old. So it's good business practice. It's consistent with the board's business practice of ensuring long-term financial sustainability for this particular operation, to ensure that folks who do in fact connect to the system are essentially paying fair and equitable rates. So in fact, they are reimbursing the district for its investment in the water plant, sewer plant, purchase of water shares, things of that nature. The general highlight that we brought forward a month ago that I'd like to remind you of, is one thing we're doing is trying to simplify these particular tap fees. So essentially what we're looking at, when someone connects to the system, we would charge them a connection for the water infrastructure, the sewer infrastructure, and the storm drainage infrastructure. We have, for example, right now, the water infrastructure, multiple tap fees. One is called the water system fee, another is called the water resource fee, which traditionally have been reimbursement for water rights, water shares. One change we've made is we've combined those two particular fees into what's now known as a water system fee. The general summary of changes in place, and we focused last month on what the impact would be to a residential development. And generally, comparing the current tap fees to the proposed tap fees, looking at roughly a $1,200 decrease in those particular fees. One concern that I think came from the meeting in December is if in fact these tap fees essentially are to ensure that as future development happens, we can acquire water rights, acquire storage of water rights, expand water plants, expand wastewater plants. We want to ensure, obviously, that we have the financial resources to be able to do that. So one of the very in-depth components of this particular fee study is looking at our future capital needs, comparing those to the rates that would be generated with these particular tap fees. And even though the tap fees are supposed to decrease by roughly $1,200, I mean, what I can say with a fair degree of confidence is dealing with our Public Works Director, working with our Utilities Master Plan, which identifies future additions to our utility infrastructure, that the answer is yes, these tap fees can pay for those particular system increases. And again, I have no basis of the fees now and why they were set in the method they were set 10 or 15 years ago. And that was essentially the due diligence of this particular project. Conversely, what we will see, and I may have misspoke in the cover letter, and I think the mayor caught this, we're talking about residential tap fees decreasing by roughly $1,200, which is roughly 5% of the total collective tap fee. For our commercial customers as well, the collective tap fee in all likelihood would decrease as well. I think I mentioned in the cover that what I had called the water system fee would actually be increasing by 4.5%. But what I neglected to put in that particular cover memo is similar to the residential tap fee, that we are eliminating a component called the water resource fee. So even though the water system fee is increasing by 4%, the decrease in the water, or the elimination, of the water resource fee and combining that fee now in the new tap fee has a net impact of generally having a modest decrease in the connection for our commercial customers as well. An additional financial concern that I had was I was looking at our 5-year financial plan, which the budget is built on, and part of that premise is the growth that we're anticipating here within town. Projects that the board has approved, for example, a storage facility in 2011 immediately adjacent to Costco. I think we have a office building that already has a final development plan adjacent to the water treatment plant, and that, for example, is supposed to be constructed or start in 2014. So based on some of those basic assumptions we used to build the budget, what I did is a comparison of system development fees that we would collect under the proposed fee structure, under the new fee structure and the existing fee structure. And essentially, those fees are revenue neutral. So from a revenue standpoint, essentially what we're talking about is a revenue neutral change in the system development fees. But between categories, there'll be some fluctuations up and down. So with that, I think that's pretty much a summary of what we have. One correction I would like to note in the information we have before you. Essentially, you'll be acting on changing the fees in what's known as Appendix A. And there was one error in Appendix A. It had nothing to do with what are called these system development fees, but on page A5 of Appendix A, the very first item is something called a flow charge for sewer use. So for our commercial sewer customers, we have a monthly fixed service fee, and then we have a variable fee depending upon how much water they are using. The assumption is as they generate water, that water then goes into the particular waste stream. That fee was erroneously changed in the document you have noted at $1.14, and the only change I would like to make is that fee needs to be $1.10 per 1,000 gallons.
Page A5 at the top.
The very first item, flow charge for all sewage flows. So with that minor correction, obviously I would be here to answer any questions you may have.
1.1. That's the change, not 1.14, right?
That is correct, Mayor.
Yeah, okay.
$1.10 per 1,000 gallons.
Okay. Questions from the board? I have a couple of questions. So you've eliminated the water resource fee. I've got to remember if I'm using the terminology correctly, which would be paying for our long-term water portfolio, and combining that into one fee. I guess I don't have any particular problem with that. Is there any downside to eliminating the specificity about where these funds are going?
Typically not. From an accounting perspective, essentially all the funds go into essentially one big pot right now. The water resource designation, discussing with our consultants, in all likelihood, it harkens back to a day if you have a large part of your system used by agricultural use. So really, it's not consistent with rate making philosophy right now. But But back to your original question, as it relates to, is there a concern by funding a number of different capital projects with the water system fee, water rights, storage of water rights, system improvements, transmission lines? No, there's not an issue, and it's considered a standard accounting practice, essentially, to commingle those funds.
Okay, so as you're aware, I've struggled with trying to understand this and how this analysis was done, and I'm happy to approve it as it is, since I think that it's spent a lot of time looking into it. But I just, from a philosophical perspective, what's happening here is that when the town is built out, that these tapping fees and system development fees will pay for the infrastructure and for the acquisition of necessary water rights, except that doesn't truly be the case because Richmond discounted their tapping and SDF fees for a period of time, so that we're not actually catching up to that level. Is that true?
Well, if in fact things come to fruition, we've incorporated, for example, the development plans that have been approved by the board. So the largest component of that, for example, is the town center development. And this line of questioning came up in December as well. If in fact the town center development builds out per the plan, where will we be financially? And the mayor is correct in that when Richmond and MDC Holdings established this metropolitan district and essentially set as board of directors of this metropolitan district and discounted certain system development fees for their particular development, it had a negative financial impact. To some degree, we've been living with that negative financial impact over the last decade, in as much as we've been supporting the utility with sales and use tax revenues. So essentially, through that support of the utility with sales and use tax revenues, we've assisted and paid down debt for this particular district. If in fact, back to my initial premise, I'm sorry, that if the town center develops as planned, we will have more revenue than we need as it relates to expanding facilities, buying water rights, buying storage facilities. And essentially, one appropriate use of those particular funds would be to pay off debt that was issued and was supported in the past with these sales and use tax revenues.
So it wouldn't be able to completely pay off that debt. Is that true? I mean, I guess it depends on when this all comes to fruition.
Our consultants, not familiar with the financial modeling, I think misspoke at the meeting in December. But our financial modeling shows that, yes, it would be sufficient to pay off.
Yes, because I thought that they said that it wasn't enough to pay off the debt, but...
And that was erroneous.
Okay. Well, that made all my questions much more clear. Okay, Trustee Skomatz. And
So just to recap also from that meeting, my recollection is that the sort of rate-setting philosophy for this does not help us sort of recover costs for O&M or upgrades or fixing or whatever to our current system, that all has to come out of current usage rates. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. That makes me nervous. So anyway, all right.
And I guess the other last question for me is that I assume that these would adjust periodically based upon inflation. I mean, that's sort of what we do in the past. Is that true?
Correct. What we would propose doing, and I think it was just noted in the cover memo, is we would look at essentially a construction inflation percentage. And looking back the last 20 years, that amount has averaged about 4%. So generally what we propose each and every year is we would increase these fees 4%.
Annually. Okay.
Correct.
And you can't build that into this ordinance?
I perhaps leave that to the attorney.
Not as written.
It would certainly be my preference.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
We can look at how to do that. I mean, I think it makes sense. It hasn't been done in this ordinance that you're considering tonight, but we can certainly look into trying to do that so that we don't have to keep coming back.
Does it take 2 readings?
Oh.
True. So, for example, right now, the 2010 rates that we're setting includes the 2010 inflator. That is already built in. We were planning to come back annually thereafter in 2011 for the 4% increase. I would suggest perhaps during the budget review process and the budget documents, which the district will approve for the 2011 budget, that we try to incorporate that language where it's automatically inflated by that 4% figure.
My preference would be an automatic inflator.
Automatic is always good, but I can imagine, though, in the future, we'll have rates scheduled. I mean, we've done our due diligence about taking these things out of the code
Right.
and making these actually a fee schedule. I assume that, one meeting out of the year, we're going to just go over our fee schedules for X, Y, and Z, and then they'll have to be all approved at that time. But I don't feel strongly about it, and I assume that we're not having anybody tapping anytime soon, except for perhaps one.
Yes, there's not a huge climber right now for individuals tapping into our system.
Okay, and that the fees actually go down, so.
Well, I just wanted to, since we have no date certain for the development of our town center, if development doesn't happen over there, are these fees able to pay off what we need to pay off, or will there have to be another, aside from inflation increase?
I think we would have to evaluate that. If the development parameters are dramatically different than our assumptions, dramatically higher, dramatically lower, I think it would be something we would need to revisit, yes.
Okay. Did I see another question? I don't think so. This would
Comment.
be opportune. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I know there was one. Oh, it's you. That's right.
Oh, yes. The one comment, and this was one that, and the board has always been very sensitive to this, and I think the consultants did a very good job in presenting the data back in December, which was the town currently has one of the lowest SDFs within the immediate surrounding area. And this just improves our position. And the reason that that's so valuable is that when we are competing for prospective development with some of our neighboring communities, and I would remind the board of some of our recent discussions for some Colton Road development where we were in competition with our neighbors to the immediate east, that the system development fees are what drew them to Superior and had them leave our neighbors. So.
Okay. This would be perfect timing for public comment. Yes.
So can I just ask some questions from an education standpoint?
Sure.
So if the tapping fee is a $1,200 reduction, isn't that the cost for a residential, somebody in a residential unit to pay, so it would decrease our cost to tap into the water system?
For new development.
So if you were to pass this with new development with all the new homes that were approved last meeting, wouldn't that reduce the revenue for the town? I don't understand.
So the answer is haven't been approved yet, but I get your meaning, and the answer is yes, they would go down to some degree.
So would it be to the advantage of the town?
But it comes to the district and not to the town.
Oh, okay. So there's no direct revenue to the town on the $1,200?
No, it's going to the water district.
To the water district,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
And there's a huge increase in the irrigation fee. So, okay. Additional public comment or questions? Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, close the public hearing, and I will entertain a motion. Trustee Skumatz.
I'd like to move Superior Metropolitan District Number 1, Resolution Number SMD Number 1, Series 2010, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Superior Metropolitan District Number 1, setting amending the district's rules and regulations by adoption of a new Appendix A to the rules and regulations.
Motion by Director Skumatz. Is there a second? By Director D'Souza. Discussion regarding this. I don't think we're spending any money, so all in favor?
I'm stating because I'm not fully aware of what's going on.
Okay. So that's approval by Trustee Williams, Giguris, D'Souza, Muckle, Skumatz, and Sorelli, with an abstention by Mr. Kuffner due to lack of, Director Kuffner, due to lack of knowledge on that particular issue, and it seems like that's a reasonable, I don't know if it's, yeah. That motion carries. Thank you very much. With that, we're on item number 10, approval of the committee and commission work programs. Mr. Randall.
Very briefly, this was a process that started a year ago. In fact, I believe we actually asked the commissions last January to begin preparing work programs, and the board approved them in the month of March. We established the annual process that said during the fourth quarter we wanted each of our 5 advisory committee and commissions to prepare proposed work programs for the board and the board would give their consideration of those requests at the first meeting in January. Thus, we're before you today. You've received all 5. Compliment each of the groups. They've given a lot of serious thought to what it is that they would like to be spending their time and attention on in the course of the coming year. One of the reasons for this was that there were some instances where we had either groups wanting to be involved in certain things that the board had no interest in them being involved in. We had groups working on projects for which had some budget implications, but the board wasn't aware of that they were working on them until it came time to pay a bill. So trying to avoid those snafus and communication lapses, we came up with this work program idea. And again, I think it worked very, very well last year, and I compliment each of the groups this year. You've received all 5. There were 2 issues that I thought that the board needed to be made aware of, and we've summarized it in the cover memo. The first one was the Historical Commission, more of a point of clarification, that if we do not do traditional Superior Days, we might want to have a little bit more flexibility in that. And then the second one has to do with the Planning Commission, and I would remind you a year ago we had 2 requests from the Planning Commission that the board said we're not comfortable with.
Was it a year ago?
It was a year ago. And this was one that they had put on their work program last year. They've put it on again this year. I'm recommending that you delete it from it. The board has spent a lot of time over the course of the last year, many years, in its economic development efforts. And just to make sure that we're not at cross purposes, the board came up, I believe it was last June or July, with a very detailed action plan for business attraction and retention. If you want it to be revisited and want it to be revisited by one of your advisory boards, great. But I know you individually spent a lot of time on it within the last 6 or 7 months, so I wanted that to be brought to your attention. Other than that, we're recommending everything else that you've received.
Thank you. Trustee D'Souza?
I just had a question about the RCAC, and maybe that's what Trustee Skumatz is going to bring up about just the one if they needed a temporary employee to
My
assist.
apologies, there were 3.
So I don't know. Is that what you wanted to address?
Nope.
Okay. I was just wondering how RCAC, if you've heard back from them, or maybe as an RCAC representative, is that going to be a problem to take that out of?
I think that the RCAC would prefer the help because it ends up on the shoulders of the same people all the time, but they'll make do. That would be my thought.
Do you know how, I don't know, I don't have the, what that cost was, or what estimate?
There wasn't anything in the work program, and one of the things that the board had asked as well, and for the last couple of years we've done this, is that during the budget formulation process in the months of May, June, and July, we go to each of the advisory boards and say, are there any things that you want to see included in your budget? RCAC has incredible input into that process because we have the solid waste collection, the hazardous materials, the electronics, all sorts of activities. And this one just came up at the
Oh, okay. That's a good point.
after the budget process.
It seemed fair to ask. It was a good catch.
Trustee Skumatz?
I had a couple of comments on several of these. So on the Planning Commission one, I wasn't sure when on number 1 where it says other chapters of municipal code where appropriate. I wasn't sure how where appropriate got defined, or whether it was that whether the board set that, or the town manager set that, or the committee set that, or where was where appropriate. And maybe it's my lack of familiarity with all of the other chapters of Superior Metropolitan Code and what their coverage is, but
Certainly, Chapter 16 remains a task.
Made sense. Totally got that one. Yeah.
There have been other times when the board has referred items, most recently the residential green building standards. And I would anticipate that we would probably send the commercial green building standards once we've received them and have completed our review, probably to the Planning Commission again. Whether that was their intent here or something else.
I can perhaps add something. We may have cleaned this up in our code rewrite, but in the past there had been some Planning Commission references in other parts of the code that that required their action on some other part because they were mentioned in it. I'm thinking of terms of office or terms of.
That's right, and there sometimes the establishing sections.
Yeah, we may have cleaned that up already now through our code review, but there's still always that possibility where it might be something that carries over just because of how the code is worded. in a
There's
particular-
still some language establishing the planning commission and the terms and the procedures for vacancies and all that that are still contained within section or Title II of the code, Chapter 2, excuse me. So, I mean, in theory, if we were redoing that again, you may ask the planning commission to comment on that.
So maybe, those three that you mentioned, the two building codes and the land use, totally get that. Maybe if it's something outside of that or something that's not completely obvious, whoever staffs that or the town manager sort of gives us a heads up and say, maybe not, or, yeah, but if it.
I don't want to wordsmith, but where requested?
Yeah, you know, I don't think it's terribly, we're going to be spending staff time, so if there's like some huge new project, obviously that's going to come before the board before we're going to be spending a whole bunch of staff time, so.
They're pretty sensitive to not going off and doing things on their own.
And I totally want their input on these kinds of, physical infrastructure things. Yeah, so that's no problem on that. Number 4, I was a little bit confused, and I guess, what does it mean by saying proactively monitoring? It doesn't necessarily mean meeting with ConocoPhillips or anything like that, right?
I think the board was very clear that they didn't want to be sticking its nose into a neighboring community's plan review and approval process. So I didn't read it that way.
Just checking what
And
proactive
that's
means.
their staff, so.
Okay.
Do you have anything?
Thanks. Just
I mean, the way
clarifying
that,
where I stand on it anyway, and everybody else can,
the way that I read this was that, there will be, probably will be impacts in town, traffic,
doubt.
circulation plans, that type of stuff, and it would be important for us to understand that, and obviously, we're not approving it, but if we have significant comments, that we'd want to have that up front and give those comments to our neighboring municipality.
And I don't want to have to be monitoring that. I won't have the sense of that. But the planning commission is perfect. Exactly. Just wanted to make sure, trying to figure out where the line of proactively was drawn.
Well, one thing I'd say is that ConocoPhillips did mention that they are very interested in trying to find ways that their workers can commute without automobiles, looking for multimodal types of transportation. And so that was one of the things that I think they were looking for input from other areas as far as trail connection. And maybe
Draw bike route arrows?
Well, it's sort of, yeah, really. I mean, that was...
I mean,
yeah.
there is actually obvious connection in the future whenever we have these developments underneath 36 through a vista next to the campus, but we don't own that, and there's...
Be a very important trail connection leading to the town center, and so that you
Absolutely.
would
That was the
want
other
the planning
section,
commission to be involved in
Absolutely. Just trying to clarify proactive. On the ProStack one, I didn't realize there was an issue regarding dogs and animals in parks and open space, and so that was a new one on my. I remember that one being something. It sounded important and interesting. I liked number 6. That was great. And number 7, though, the one that got raised a little bit earlier here about abolishing the possible representative things, that caused me a little bit of question. I wondered what the pros and cons were, and I thought we were sort of assigning people to specific things, and I thought actually that advocacy thing was something that kind of in my brain distinguished this group from OSAC. Otherwise, it seems to me there's an awful lot of overlap between OSAC and ProStack. So that advocacy seemed like a pretty core thing for this group to me, and maybe we can hear about the pros and cons.
Do you want to do that now, or I
started
assume
walking? I don't know.
Oh. Sure.
I can-
Yeah, we
or-
can either do that if
or
it's
I can
important
ask
now, but I'm assuming that this resolution and changes are coming back forward for further discussion. But, Mr. Payne, if you have something to add.
Jim Payne, 2475 Clayton Circle, Chair of ProStack. I got the impression that in the earlier conversation, we may have left a little wrong impression. The members actually are very interested in strengthening their advocacy roles and getting more involved. What we were trying to do was leave some flexibility to assign those annually within the group, so people could switch off or take what's most interested to them and have some sort of a process at the beginning of each year when we'd agree on who was going to do what for that year. But we were
Can
not.
that be something that comes back before us? Because we kind of assign people according to certain slots, and maybe if we get at least to revisit that, that might be
We will,
that might be a
because
good
there's-
compromise.
there's
We can do it
enabling.
that way.
That might be a good compromise.
Any change would require the
Right.
board's approval. Right
I'd
now,
like to
the enabling ordinance stays the way it is. They're saying that they'd like to look at that and recommend some changes to it,
It has to
which
come
the
back
board
to
would
you.
have to approve.
Oh, so you're saying we get another bite at this?
It's coming back because we have to change the resolution.
Right. But that could easily be done by coming up with our suggestions, submitting it to you for your sign-off. if you
Yeah.
want.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think those were all my questions. I'm sorry to the trouble.
No, no problem. Other questions or comments about this? Public comment, questions, comments about this?
I'm sorry to get up here on each issue, but we also are dealing with some problems.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Steve Smith, 653 Eaton Circle. So this is a question in my role being on the HOA. It's been brought to our attention that there have been significant changes in things that we have to allow the residents to do in our community. And you guys, in part of your planning, if you could include us as part of that planning in those changes. For an example, we've been told that on some shape or form, we have to allow clothing lines now so that people can dry their clothes because of some sort of energy rules. And we have no idea of how to access that information to make sure that we're following the rules. So if there's something that you're going to do in adding publications and those kind of things in your business planning this year, if you could think about informing the public, because we don't know where to go to find that type of information.
Okay. The town attorney is looking at me, so
Well,
I think I have an answer to this. but-
there are different laws related to what HOAs can do,
HOAs can
so
do.
we can't, they don't always intertwine. So
Well,
sometimes the legislature says what you can and can't do, and sometimes they say what the town can and can't do, and
I'll give you an example. The whole movement towards using solar energy affected us tremendously. We at first didn't want it because of aesthetics reasons. We didn't understand the full thing when it first came out, and then we understood that we had to include it as part of our planning. So there's certain rules that you get that are requirements of law that are happening more and more today, and with significant changes, we don't know how to access any of that information. So if you had those things that are mandated, if there's a way that we could be informed on those.
unfortunately, I can't do that. I mean, I can represent the town and tell the town what it needs to do, but it often differs from what the HOA needs to do.
And it's frequently, and there are some, I guess I was to segue to the attorneys, sometimes it will recommend or change ordinances for town that don't change what's happening in the HOA.
Sure.
So,
But sometimes the legislature changes
but the
what
legislature,
HOA
sometimes,
is allowed
and there's a
to
couple things I can think of. It's, I think that solar
Energy conservation devices was one.
and when I first entered the community, it had to do with dishes for reception of satellites.
So those are the exact kind of things we're talking about that are rules that are public now. And one of these new rules is something about energy that you cannot force people and tell them how to dry their clothing.
And that,
So-
unfortunately, you would have to consult your own attorney about.
Okay.
We can't.
Sorry.
Is that some of the state statutes?
We're not
that you
in
can
that
find out?
position.
I can't, even if I could find out, I can't advise the HOA.
Yeah, we wouldn't want advice. We'd just like to, in the shared knowledge, that if there's things that you guys have to make sure that the regular part of the community has to follow that's not in the HOA. For an example, if you had to allow people to dry their clothes in original town because of some state statute or federal law that was handed down to you, if you could share that information with us publicly on the website so I could follow that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I don't know if we can comply with that all the time because sometimes we don't really know what's happening. But, communication is always the best, and I'm sure that we'd be happy to share that when we know. Yep. Thank you. Additional public comments regarding this issue? Anything else from the board? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion just to approve. Trustee Skumatz?
I'd like to make a motion to approve and accept the 2010 Advisory Committee and Commission work programs.
With
Oh, God.
with the
With-
changes.
Yes, as amended.
Okay. Motion by Trustee Skumatz, second by Trustee Sorelli. Discussion. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Let's see. With that, we're on to item number 11, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with All the Details, Inc. for the regional draw event for Superior. Mr. Randall.
You've seen the proposal or the staff's recommendation and the Events Committee's recommendations. I think this will be at least the third, if not the fourth time, since last year's goal-setting session established a priority for coming up with a new, larger community regional draw event. Most recently, there was some discussion about the name. Superior Lifestyle Weekend was raising some questions, so the committee has come back and is now suggesting the Superior Mogul Classic, since it is hinged on, centered around the recreation of the Mogul Bismarck bicycle racing event that used to be hosted, conducted in Superior. The calendar, the plan, and even your budget anticipates that this particular event, a 3-day event, would be conducted in May of this year. We're behind the 8 ball in terms of proper planning. But as you've looked at it, endorsed it in components, this is the first step, which is getting the capacity for fundraising, all of the organizational things necessary in order to be able to pull off an event of this magnitude. So I think it's a very aggressive calendar, cautiously optimistic that it's attainable. You also have seen some budget numbers, which are consistent with the budget numbers that the board had looked at during our budget preparation. Juanita, I don't know if you have any comments that you'd like to make about the process, but I was impressed with the work program. I'm comfortable with the team that has been assembled. The team includes some people that have a long history with the town in conducting some of our events, but they've really embellished their capacity by going out and partnering with some other groups that bring some real good expertise to this event.
Ask Director Dominguez if she could just kind of, in case anybody has curiosity about what we're talking about, to describe in generality.
Sure. Director Juanita Dominguez, Parks, Recreation, Open Space. So we started last year, came to the board in April. We had an internal events committee get together and look at the possibilities of putting together a regional draw event, looking at a wellness type event. We thought we could bring back the Morgul Bismarck. Morgul Bismarck is a race that came through Superior in the early 80s and until about 1988 was looped from McCaslin onto 128 down to 93 and along Marshall. And this year will be the 25th anniversary of American Flyers, the movie, which showcased Superior. I believe it was in the 80s. But again, it brings us a great opportunity to put together a regional draw event that we think will be very successful. It will take several years for us to build upon the event, but really using the event and the expertise we have in town with all events consulting group and the team that they've put together to make a fabulous 3-day event on Memorial Day weekend this year.
And I'll ask you just a couple of questions regarding specificity. So we're talking about a variety of different bicycle events. One of them, if I remember, I don't remember the term. There's a variety of terminologies, but there's stages, and there's the big loop, and then they're talking about a time trial, and a couple different formats. Where are you at with that?
So this particular group, the Internal Events Committee, has been working for about a year on the specifics of the entire event. We put out an RFP in the fall, and we had a group of individuals come back and put together a plan for us. They did a lot of work without getting paid to put this event together. Right now, we've got 3 different routes, and I do have a brief presentation ready for the board to look at, and actually the team would be best suited to go through some of those details.
Well done. For tonight, you mean?
For tonight.
Oh, okay.
Bring it on. So with that, let me
introduce
that
probably would
Christy
clarify a lot
Audette
of
with
this.
all the details, and she'll start with giving you a brief overview of the 3 days.
Great, thanks. And welcome. Happy New Year.
Hi, thank you. Happy New Year to you. Christy Audette with all the details. Basically, as Juanita said, we're sort of building on and fine-tuning some of the details that we've already talked about a little bit with this weekend. Don't believe there's anything that's changed in a big way at all since the last time we all talked, although we've put just a little bit more detail to it. The event overview, basically these are all the reasons that we originally put in front of you for why this is a great event. The event overview basically would be on Friday evening, we would kick off with a time trial, and I have Brian here, who's actually the part of our team that does the cycling component, and he's going to go through that actual course with you and let you know where that would be. We're looking at doing some kind of a sponsored pasta dinner at the park, and do a big tent and do a dinner and actually have the racers and the families and the community members be able to interact and have a fun kickoff dinner with a ceremony, just introducing, again, the racers and kind of what's going to happen over the course of the weekend, and some entertainment that evening, a band of some sort to kind of make it a festive event. On Saturday, we would do a criterium race in Rock Creek, which is a loop, and again, Brian will go through those details with you, show you where that would be. That's a very spectator-friendly route, so that people people can actually, again, sort of build on what they've seen Friday night and get excited about the race during the weekend. In the park, we would have a food showcase that would go on the rest of the weekend, and we can talk in more detail about any of these things that you have questions on. Sports and Business Expo would go on in the park. We have a full day of entertainment. We'd like to do lots of different community, kids groups, dance groups, bands, that kind of thing. A community art exhibition, which we'd like to invite, again, youth groups and schools and things to participate and get that kicked off very soon so that students can do different mediums and have an exhibition of art. Sustainability exhibits that would also be in the park, talking about different options that are available for sustainable lifestyle elements. We've got transportation, recycling, all kinds of things that we could highlight there. The American Flyers movie screening that evening, possibly with special guests. We're looking at maybe inviting in some extras that used to be part of the movie or something like that, and making that a kind of a fun thing. And we're want to dub that a bike-in movie. So rather than a drive-in movie, a bike-in movie in the park. On Sunday, the highlight of the weekend would be the Morgan Bismarck course, and again, Brian can go over the details of that with you. We have all the same things going on in the park all day to draw everybody. Our whole goal here is something for everyone. So if you're not necessarily, a biking enthusiast, or, you're sort of on the fringe of that community, there's still a lot of fun things for you and your family to come and do throughout the course of the weekend. We would cap off Sunday late afternoon with an awards ceremony and then do a closing concert. We'd like to bring in some kind of a headline, at least a regional headliner. We realize our budget this year is a little bit tight, but we want to be sure that we bring in somebody who people know from the area and do a big closing concert. So that's our overview of our weekend. The team that we've been able to assemble, that we feel very confident can pull this off well, as myself and my husband, we would kind of oversee and be kind of the event managers for everybody. Brian Hodzinski is the bike race manager, and I'll go over his qualifications in just a moment. We have Wendy Stewart that we've brought in to do sponsorship and marketing. And then, of course, we have the guidance and the overseeing of the town's internal events committee, which includes staff, the chamber, and the Boulder County Sheriff's Department, who we've all been kind of meeting with all the while. Brian, who's going to get up and speak in just a moment, he started Boulder Racing in 1999, and he's been successfully promoting bike races in this area ever since. Boulder Racing has a great relationship with the town. They've done lots of things here. They do the Koppenberg race that's every spring in Superior, and that has been very well received, as well as a Louisville stage race that he does. So he's got lots of good relationships in the area and has done very well producing these events with very little negative impact on the residents, which I think is also very important. He understands how to work through the different channels and what's going to work here in the town. Brian also has an MBA and a very solid business background, which I feel makes him a very excellent member of this team. Wendy brings over 20 years of marketing experience to our team. Her specialties include alternative energy and sustainability, and she has extensive experience and relationships in the natural lifestyle market, and again, which makes her a perfect fit for this event. My husband and I've been in the events business for over 20 years and have done lots of local, regional, and national events around. I've worked with the town very successfully for the past, it's 5 or 6 years doing the events, and have been really proud to see some of our events grow and become very successful here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Brian, who's going to go over the race courses with you, and you can answer questions on those.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Brian Klazinski, president of Boulder Racing Incorporated. So as Christy mentioned, I've promoted bicycle races the last 10 years, and for the last 9 of which I've done a race annually within Town of Superior, Cottonburg. Prior to that, did the Superior Circuit, which actually went through Middle Rock Creek. And so this year's the time trial course we're proposing. I actually did this last Memorial Day weekend on a Friday evening as well. And it starts right outside here at the Town Hall on McCaslin, goes up McCaslin, the hump, the wall, all the way to 128, and makes a right and ends right at the right before the trailhead there on 128, just by 93. So it's real light impact on traffic. It's on the right side of the shoulder the whole way. We don't have to close off any intersections as well. Next, this would be a new course, criterium course. This is just south of the community park there. And so it would be on Colton and turn up here on Rock Creek Circle. And so there definitely would be an impact, but we can manage the impact on these rental units as far as the people that live here through the various intersections and with marshals and such, be able to navigate traffic in and out through the course of the day. And then lastly, obviously, is the Morgul course, which this hasn't been done for quite some time, obviously. But it would be very similar to time trial course start. We're not sure about the start yet, but most likely on the east side of the course, somewhere on McCaslin. But it would go up just like time trial course along 128, and then on 93 downhill, and then hook up with Marshall. And in the past, I've done events on 128 where we've closed it at both ends for a number of hours, 10 hours, and we'd have a detours. During that race, we had detours along Marshall and such. So I think that course was more of an impact than this would be because we're closing down that through area. But that ran successfully. I did it once, and I believe Chris Grealish, another promoter, did it prior to me. And then we use Marshall currently on the Cottonburg course, but only a portion of it. So a portion of these roads have had events in the past, and I'm definitely confident that this event would work. And Sergeant Collins done some due diligence, and State Patrol is on board, CDOT as well. Obviously, there's probably a cost to it and a lot of logistics involved in planning, but it is feasible. And so, any questions there?
Yeah, I have. I enjoyed watching the Morgul Bismarck when I was a kid, and it was fantastic. Obviously, it went away. Why did it? Why do you think it went away?
I don't know the history of it. There was a lot of players involved, and Michael Eisner, and I think Len Pettyjohn and such, and it was ironic. I was mentioning to a friend in Boulder today, we were talking, and he had a conversation with Michael Eisner, and he said it almost grew too big for itself. Like, at one point, they even had elephants out there, a parade, and it became more about the spectator than the racing. And some of the racers felt there's a different type of, the courses. I know they did a variety of courses. But again, my history, I never had the opportunity to spectate, unfortunately, but I think at its peak, though, it was relatively large. They had up to 55,000 spectators at North Boulder Park, I think. If they do that race now, and even with 4,000 or 5,000 people there, it's, the park is quite a bit of attendance. So I can imagine back in the day, it was a national level event. It was one of the premier events, cycling events in the country at its time. So.
And so going down 93 with minimal shoulders there at a quadrillion miles an hour, is that seems like that would be exciting.
Exactly. There's been a lot of discussion on that, and that's where we get farther into due diligence, working with CDOT and the State Patrol, as far as their safety issues and such. But kind of conversation with Sergeant Collin, and he's timed it's about maybe 3 minutes on that road. It is downhill, it's fast, but it is pretty wide at some portions, and that intersection where you turn off to Marshall there is pretty wide. And a lot of that, you sweep the inside of that, get rid of all the cinders, and you take away a lot of the danger there, racers cornering. And that's a short segment there. We could even close that intersection. But again, a lot of that would come out in due diligence working with all those parties.
And I think that somebody's, maybe it was in your memo, I don't remember whose memo this was, that this would potentially be limited to a certain, there appear to be levels of racers, and
Again, depending on what CDOT and State Patrol would be comfortable with closing and what I would bring what we bring to the table as far as what kind of groups we could put on the course, there could be an aspect of that. I mean, there's different strategies there. You could put a lot of amateurs on at the same level at the course at once and stagger the start. So you'd have a lot of racers, but you close that road for a shorter amount of time. And then there's different ways you can close it. Not to say you're going to totally close it, but a rolling enclosure, whereas the policeman's in the front and behind that peloton. Whereas as they roll down, cars, oncoming traffic pulls to the side of the shoulder, or depending on if there's enough room, racers just abide by the laws and stay on the right side of the shoulder. So there's a number of strategies that the police can implement as far as roadway closures, if you will.
And your gestalt feeling about who would attend an event like this?
I'm pretty well connected with the American Cycling Association, which is the de facto sanctioning organization for competitive cycling events in Colorado. And last year I kind of experimented with this date. There's never been a cycling event on this weekend. There's been the Iron Horse in Durango, and everybody shied away from it. The Iron Horse is a little bit of different demographic than the normal competitive cyclist that lives in the Front Range. And so having the precedent already set that I've done a few races on this weekend last year, and ironically not knowing this was going to come about in a similar format, it's, per the pro forma projections, we can easily hit as far as the amount of participants we expect as competitors. And then the format we would use a stage race format or an omnium, whereas racers, when they register, they'd basically be committed to racing all the events. So in that format, it keeps everybody in town for the whole weekend, but it keeps them engaged and instead of coming in and out for one event or two. I guess to answer your question, we would hit majority of the competitive cycling community within Colorado.
The competitive recreational sort of level?
Yeah. Well, when I say competitive, it's anybody that comes and does a bike race. So we have the segment that we've seen the most growth in has actually been the amateur, what we refer to as Cat 4, but the new people coming into cycling. They call it the Lance Armstrong effect. So Lance is doing the tour, and everybody's getting into road racing now. So we've seen a lot more women and dads, if you will, coming in and getting into it and racing, and then the kids come to spectate. And there's always junior events, so the kids can race as well during the day. So, so that's been our largest group per se.
And how long would you think that this would go on for this particular event?
You mean like hours of the day?
Yeah.
Again, it comes down to how we can put people on the course. We could do it probably in as short as, I'd say 6.5 hours, 7 hours, probably the minimum amount of time. Depending, it started pretty early in the morning too, and that way it could be out of there pretty quick, or it could go on as long as, you probably want to go over, again, it's tough, but 10 hours.
Okay.
But we've had, like I said, 128 closed, and that was at least a 10-hour day. We did that closure.
And there was a question about the miles at 13 or something like that is what I remember. Some ballpark in there.
13.1 is
okay.
What I thought I saw in the
Sounds good. Yes, sir.
Do you anticipate to have riders from outside of Colorado coming?
Yeah, so again, it's just with the time scale as far as the calendar's been, I've reserved a date on the calendar for a bike race. So that calendar's starting to be distributed. It's not that specific yet, but that calendar gets distributed within Colorado. And what we find as far as cyclists, we get a lot of people coming from Wyoming, but as far as Kansas as well, and then up to New Mexico. There is that risk of Durango, Iron Horse happening that weekend, but again, it's a kind of a different caliber of rider, more of a tour rider, if you will, not so much a competitive cyclist. And their demographic is more from the southern end as well, Arizona and New Mexico. But I think it's going to get great representation regionally. You usually don't have people from California coming to Colorado events. And a lot of it, if you do have people traveling in, it'll be at the higher caliber type of racer. And but with the prize list that's in the Performa, that's an excellent possibility that we can get a lot of top-notch riders.
So given this is a 3-day event, I propose we build a big hotel in Superior real fast.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we do.
There's been no mention of this, but I just have to ask, this is also the weekend of the Boulder Boulder. And so you don't foresee that being a problem?
What last year, that was my big risk as far as going forward with the event. And so we're not proposing any cycling races on the Monday.
Yeah,
And
I noticed
honestly,
that.
sure. I mean, you definitely, I'm sure, you run competition, maybe hotel rooms or something like that. But I was able to do my events last year as a test bed, if you will, and getting fencing and such like that it was all possible. It just Boulder needs their stuff there the night before, and that's totally feasible in what we're trying to do. So it's a whole nother day.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's a busy weekend.
It's probably not your part of the planning, but might there be some competition for sponsorship from same people who might be already committed to the extent they want to be? Or?
Again, we can move. I can
Move on.
pass it on to Wendy. So
What a segue.
actually, she's up anyway. So, any other questions about the race course or anything? Great, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to address that question. Wendy Stewart, event promoter with all the details. And the one thing I hear here tonight is what I hear every time I walk into an event is we're behind the 8 ball. And sometimes I wonder, am I an event promoter, an event planner, or magician? Because a lot of the times we are. We don't even know how we do it, except we start somewhere and we invest in our future. So that idea of sponsorship, cross-marketing, cross-sponsorship works a lot, especially right now. I'm getting really creative. And so to get there, to be able to get beyond, are we behind the 8 ball? Is there too much competition going on out there in our state, is to look at a marketing plan, which is where I would come in. I would help with the marketing plan. I would help create a whole sponsorship packet. So we would set ourselves apart from other like-kind events in the area, but also work in conjunction with them. And when I look at this event, I get really excited about it because I've done other like-kind events and are working on other like-kind events today. A little bit of difference with this event. There's been a lot of energy behind it and a lot of planning that sometimes doesn't get done. So to be able to take that and kind of run with it and already have some pre-planning meetings with the town of Superior and the Chamber of Commerce and some local businesses that I've been able to call up and some regional, hey, this is getting ready to be recreated from the past, a whole new event with the past flavor. What do you guys think? So I get pretty energized about it and look at the idea of, how do we cross-promote with, the regional, the local, the outreach. I just finished a event in Lawrence, Kansas. I came from there and still go back there for work. So when they do their bike races and I get to help with that, is how do I cross-promote? Because their big one is in July. So how do we go into that city and cross-promote this one? It'll be easy for me to be able to do. Deadline for securing key sponsors, we'll have that in the marketing plan. Promotion of all confirmed information in each outreach, talking to the chamber, daily, weekly, talking to the town of Superior, and making sure we're utilizing all our resources, that we're all working together. So with that, I'm going to open up to questions and make sure that I've covered everything. So marketing, sponsorship, fundraising, that's my expertise.
I guess just what is your deadline for securing the first key sponsor, and what's the fallback if with all this rush it doesn't happen?
What we would like to hear tonight is that we have the green light, and that'll be put into the marketing plan. So any feedback, 10 days from now. I have a sponsorship kit, kind of a template already in place. And as we hear green light, this sounds good, we'll move forward.
Are you going to look at sponsors corporate sponsors that did the Morgul Bismarck in the past?
We are, Deborah, and we've talked about that. Do we go out and get new? Do we work with the old? There's some like-kind sponsors. And so I think we can utilize the past and move forward with, you get in now in the first inaugural event, and we'll save it for you in the future down the road. So we're going to kind of look at both sides.
Okay. So Coors Beer and Celestial Seasonings is on your list.
First and second call.
And XYZ health bars. What's neat is my other like-kind clients that I work with. I'm already have a direct in to a lot of the companies that are local, but there are some regional companies out there I think that would really look at this.
Okay.
So, Dana, did I answer your question?
Yeah, it was more about sponsorship. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff?
Questions, comments from anybody?
Yeah.
Just,
Trustee Williams, Trustee Gregoris, Trustee D'Souza, unless it's a question. Is it a question?
well, it was a question.
Yeah, so I'll start with you.
Well, the question was, at one point in time, we did discuss taking this down to, or having an option of maybe a one-day event instead of a larger 3-day event, and I'm just wondering, I don't recall exactly what happened with that, on that part of it, so maybe you can just refresh. our
Sure.
memory
The
on that.
difficulty with having a one-day event, especially if we're going to have any type of bike race, is you're going to have the same approximate costs for certain items. So we're still going to have the timing. We're still going to have the barricades. We're still going to have the coordination with the CDOT and those kind of things. So really, you're not going to save a whole lot by doing a one-day event.
I mean, this sounds to me beyond just a bike race. It's really a community event that hopefully will invite every member of the community to participate in one form or another. So it's much bigger than that.
Absolutely.
The main event, the competition, but it's getting everybody else involved. I think it's great. It's a very ambitious plan. So, yeah, well, good. Well, I think we can establish, an annual event like this, and I'm sure it's going to keep growing.
And this would be the year to do it. I mean, if you think about some of the things that Brian has said, he tested this date last year. He had a race last year. This year is the 25th anniversary of the American Flyers movie. It's going to be a tough 4.5 months, but this is the group that you want to do it.
Trustee Williams?
So what is the total projected cost of this event?
So in the original,
There you go.
this is a revenue estimate, but on the next screen we have the expense estimates. So it's approximately $214,450, with $18,000 in last year's budget for consulting fees that we haven't expended. But that would be the cost. Again, the projections for revenue are about $132,000
For this year, the first year.
$450. And again, it's an optimistic amount, but this team again feels that we can do that.
Trustee Skumatz?
I think that bottom line sounds great. To have the net be under 100K for a 3-day event is pretty impressive. And I was when I first sort of saw this on the agenda and saw the schedule that you had for it, I thought, that's not possible. But in reading over the resumes and listening to the presentations, I'm feeling pretty confident that this is a really qualified team, and I'm feeling energized by it, and I'm hoping for a really super event. And I wanted us to add another event to our calendar. This really fits the bill. So, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to, I agree with all those comments. I have some, help me with my angst, because it is an aggressive schedule. It's a big to-do. I don't want the town of Superior coming off and being seen like, well, that was the community that tried to do this, but boy, that was really not very well done. That's not a thing we want to be left with, so help me with my angst.
Okay. So I think probably the biggest thing to help you with your angst would be the fact that we've done so much work on it already.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, quite honestly, I was part of the actual sort of team that, committee that started to work on this. So, I've had the really great, opportunity to be kind of part of that from the very beginning. And so really it's been a year of sort of formulating and discussing and doing our due diligence and going through it. So while we haven't been able to pull the trigger and officially go out there and say this event is happening, this is going to be a great event.
It's very musical.
We've done a lot of work to get it going. We've all put out a lot of feelers, and again, just minus the green light, we really, Heather from the chamber has put lots of work into already kind of talking with the community and talking with her members. Wendy's reached out more to sort of that regional and national community. Dan and I have already been kind of talking a little bit to our vendors and doing some groundwork, looking at bands and some things that might be possible with that. Brian obviously has done his due diligence to whatever degree he can without getting permits on the race courses. So we've all put a lot into this already. Mm-hmm. If it were the fact that none of us had ever heard of this event, we were standing before you tonight saying, hand it over. We'll do a great job. I totally, the angst is definitely, but I think that because we've done so much work on it, that's why we're prepared.
Okay. And there was description of having two, obviously this would work best when our town center is in fruition. We have a really big park where this would be great to stage. That's not happening right now, so you're proposing two separate spots? I'm
What
seeing
we're
a
really-
shake of head, maybe.
We're proposing actually to make Community Park our home base. So for the events part, the races, we've sort of tried to kind of make everything kind of in that area. I mean, the Morgul course goes way out and around, and so we are looking at doing some shuttles. We have $12,000 in the budget just for shuttling. We have, we've looked at several, like probably 6 or 8 parking lots around town that we could use to kind of get people all to that area, whether it be racers or spectators, to Community Park rather. We're looking at possibly using Town 9 as kind of the racers' home base, so we would probably do some fencing down there and actually have sort of their bike storage and some of their things down there to keep that away from the event area. So really, the center, the hub of activity will be Community Park, is the way that we're looking at all. But which is why the criterion, of course, being in Rock Creek and being right across from Community Park is perfect. 'Cause that is the most spectator-friendly piece of the bike race.
And this, for the director, baseball is sort of happening that time of the year also. I don't know, you probably haven't even set out a schedule yet for youth baseball and the baseball diamonds. Obviously that, I don't think, could occur.
Right, that wouldn't be occurring at that time, and I don't believe that we usually have anything going on for that weekend, but that'll be something that we'll look at very closely.
Okay.
Everything will be at center stage at Community Park, just like some of our other events are.
And that for the notification for the townhome residents over at, which I can never remember that name.
Summit.
Thank you. How far in advance will you be contacting them? And I assume that they have an HOA as well, or?
Right, I believe, the best time to start chatting with them is now.
Yeah.
But the notification, the official notification, 6 weeks in advance would be good for them to understand that we're doing some things a little bit differently.
But they won't be, you anticipate that the traffic plan would work so that they wouldn't be captured inside their townhome for 8 hours?
Right, that's what we're planning.
All right. I guess that's all my questions. Once again, it's a shame that it's important, I think, to have this occur this year just because of the timing and everything. Maybe the governor's office would get on board. I'm not sure where they are with their cycling issues, but of course, maybe I'm not sure where the governor is anymore. So I think it's a really important year, and I think that we should do it. I guess it's just too bad that we're not quite far enough along in our development, but it is what it is, as they say.
And a year and a half is too long, so.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to say, there's a lot of interest, though, in it. A lot of people, my kids come home all the time with the teachers over at Monarch asking them when are they going to have this, because they're interested in it a lot.
And so, along those lines, what would be a good contact, if people were interested in knowing more, Joe Citizen, Joe Cyclist, call Town Hall, call you, call the events coordinator.
Office.
We should probably have that on the website and notification numbers pretty soon. Yes. Yes.
We're jumping the gun.
Do it tonight.
Trustee Williams.
So I'm just curious, how confident are you of that number there on the revenue?
On the revenue. Well, these are the projections that we came in with. We actually had a firm look at our projections, and there were a couple that he felt were very aggressive. We think that we can do this. We've got a breakdown of the different revenues coming in, everything from the race registrations to food showcases to concerts. We believe we can do it.
Where did they think that you were aggressive in? What category?
The aggressiveness came with the 5-year plan.
Okay.
And
in the growth.
And sponsors.
In the growth within the
Board may recall that our financial pro forma, the 5-year budget, 2010 budget includes a $100,000 town subsidy to be reduced by 50% each year, 150, 25, fully self-supporting in the fourth year. That's where they thought we might be a little overly aggressive.
So just vaguely calculated in my head at this year being 82,000. Is that kind of roughly?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So,
Provided that number is,
Mr. Nillis isn't here anymore, but we have put it in our budget, but
Yes.
you can afford it
Yes.
with everything. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from the board, comments from the public?
So did you need something from us tonight, or what?
Yes, they did.
Yes.
Just maybe.
They would like a green light.
They would like us to approve the contract.
Okay. Trustee Skumatz? Sure.
I'd like to make a motion, Town of Superior Resolution number Three, Series 2010, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with all the details for Superior Morgul Classic.
Motion by Trustee Skumatz. Is there a second by Trustee Gregorus? Discussion, comments? All right. Willis? This is money.
This is my time.
82 grand.
Witness call.
Okay.
You're right.
Cirelli?
Yes.
D'Souza?
Yes.
Gregorus?
Yes.
Muckle?
An excited but worrisome yes.
Hefner?
Yes.
Skumatz?
Definitely, yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. So go forth and prosper and be successful.
Now the work begins. You thought the
Be
last year.
careful what you wish for.
Hey, did
right.
you get my email?
Thank you.
I'll get that for you.
Anything, so we have an executive session coming up here shortly about real estate. Anything else?
No
that
further
needs to
business.
come forward? We're not anticipating anything afterwards. Okay? So give everybody
First class.
a couple minutes, and I have to excuse everybody.
Huge.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody has to go home. So,
Because otherwise, George would have to be trained to work the buttons.
thank you, everybody.
I don't have that
Appreciate it.
pressure anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Might be more fitting.
Steve,
Yeah.
These are getting easy, Joe.
I'm looking for the HOA to
Photo
jump
for the
into this.
paper.
Well, we, actually, I would like to see what we can do.
I mean, at least some, yeah, it would be great.
It's
This is
huge.
huge. Yeah, this is huge.
This is for all of us.
Anybody who doesn't support this, is this on?
Yeah, you're still.
Yeah, still on.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
And you know what, one thing I
Maybe it'll bring that town center after all, huh?
include the amount of money that the businesses around here are going to make.
No.
No.
Yeah, so it's not retail,
That's
it's
why-
generation.
That's why the Chamber
Yeah.
of Commerce is involved.
Yeah.
I'm going home to go bike ride.
Yeah, good shape.
There you go.
Bye.
All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session
We are still in TV.
to consider purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of real, personal, or other property pursuant to CRS 24-6-402.4 on various real estate transactions.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Skumatz, second by Trustee Sorelli. All in favor?
Yeah, they have to wait.
We're in executive.
Who made the motion?
Matt's.
Skumatz,
And I
Sorelli.
second.
Sorry. We are in executive session. Thank you very much.
TV?
Not yet. We have to.
First item of business,
Wait.
which is separate from that, was the enhanced communication policy, which the board embraced last, I believe it was July. We said one of the things we were going to do was review executive session minutes.
We're still on the table.
Yeah, we're still on.
You know,
Executive session notes. So for the first time, Phyllis is
There we go.
distributing copies of our last discussion from November.
That's loud out there.
The purpose was for the board to review